Okay, council, we're going to have roll call. Did everybody vote? Okay. Let's do it again, okay? All right, thank you. Holly?
All councilors present with Mayor Lucero and Councilor Griego previously requesting to be excused.
Thank you, Holly. Okay, I just want to make a brief comment. The agenda is a little bit different from what we usually do because we're going to be doing a combination of things today. First part of the agenda is going to consist of some old business that we had to take care of. Unfortunately, Mayor Lucero, his father passed away and he's not able to be here today, and Councilman Griego is not able to be here today. So what's going to happen is the council that's here right now, we're going to take care of some business up here, and then we're going to move forward with the agenda, and we're going to swear in the new council members. All right. Yes, Heather.
Councilor Coleman, modification to the agenda is under the oath of office for new council members. We neglected to list the re-election for Councilor Vigil, so we would want to modify the agenda to include that as well.
Okay, thank you so very much. Thank you very much.
Just a quick question for Holly or Mayor-elect Coleman. Do we need to, for the record, excuse Mayor Lucero and Councilman Griego with the agenda approval?
Yes, that is typically what you would do.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the agenda approval.
Councilor, I move that we approve the agenda with the amendment adding Councilor Vigil's oath of office and excusing Mayor Lucero and Councilman Griego.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the citizens' comments. Alamosa City Council welcomes your comments. Citizens wishing to speak may obtain a comment card, and the speaker will pass that over to the City Clerk. And do we have any more of these comment cards for anyone who may have any comments?
I don't have any more.
Okay, thank you. The first person I have is John Atencio. John, if you would, come up here and state your name. And you could leave your address if you like.
My name's John Atencio, 739 Duke Drive. I'm the general manager at Cattails Golf Course, and I'm just here since we're renewing the management agreement. If there's any further questions or anything like that, I'm here to answer those for you.
Okay.
All right, and I'd just like to thank everyone too. You know, it's been a long process getting through it. All you city council members, Heather, Eric, everybody who's worked on it, just thanks for all the hard work and getting it done with us. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next person we have is Ruthie Brown.
Thank you for letting me speak. I always say, what is it? I sleep in the county and I live at 711 State Avenue. I think I've been saying that for 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years. With the election, it's really weird that people in Alamosa voted for people who live in the county that now we can serve our community, but we can't vote on issues in Alamosa. And I don't know who put the, who put the one on the ballot without the other, but both should have been there. We should have been allowed to vote. I'm talking about any property owner. Can you hear me? Okay. Any property owner in Alamosa should be allowed to vote. City Council should be the one pushing that issue. I shouldn't have to come every year. I don't know why you don't want us to vote. But it's kind of sad that we can, you're welcoming our work if we choose to serve on a committee, but you won't welcome our vote. That being said, I think there's a deeper problem here, and I don't know that I've ever heard it addressed in Alamosa meetings here, but why can't we find 10 or 15 or 20 citizens in Alamosa who want to serve on a committee? What are we asking the right people? Are we putting the word out there? Are we involving everyone? It seems like that's the deeper root here. Not that we have to broaden our pile to another 5,000 people or however many live in the county, but why aren't people involved in Alamosa? And I think it's sad. I think it's really sad. And I'll probably come back on another issue, but I know you have an architectural plan coming forward on revamping downtown Alamosa, and if I read right in my old mind, we're also going to include or look at some kind of pathway to Cole Park and include that for all of the events. But if I'm not wrong, there is not one mention of the South Side. And we keep saying there's not a South Side. Well, if you continue to ignore the businesses on 8th and State and down 8th and down State and on 9th, there will be a division because we'll be totally left out. And I just think that's rude. I think it's very rude. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Next, we have Diana Hamilton and Mariana Young.
Hi.
Yes, feel free to
I'm
pull that
Diana
down.
Hamilton. This is Mariana Young.
Hi.
And she is the new president of the Valley Humane League. I'm the director of the Valley Humane League still. And we're just here tonight to fill you in that we have asked the city for $500 extra a month. And Mariana will explain that.
We currently have an unpaid executive director who is Diana Hamilton. She's been serving in that capacity for several years now, and she expends many of her daily hours working on VHL activities and tasks along with grant writing for VHL. So we feel that it's time to give her some compensation for working in that position, since Valley Humane League would not exist without Diana. And so we have requested an increase in the monthly stipend that we get from both the city and the county of Alamosa. And the amount that we have requested from the city is $500. And we sent a letter to the city regarding that back in October. So that is the reason we're here tonight.
Okay, thank you. I think we may be discussing something similar to that a little bit later.
Okay.
But
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Mayor Coleman?
Yes.
I do want to, we are having sound difficulties.
Okay.
I think when we do some of the ceremonial items and we're down in front, the IT will reboot the system.
Okay.
And hopefully that will fix it, but until we get there, we do have a little bit of some sound difficulty.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Dan McCann.
Dan McCann, 1809 Sunset, Alamosa, Colorado. Hello, new mayor. How are you?
Wonderful.
I got 3 subjects. By the way, maybe I am a liar, but I truly am a politician. Most politicians do lie, but I try to admit it. You know, I announced I'm not involved in small-town politics, which I really am not. I saw the newly elected mayor today. I said, well, you want me to come in? He said, yeah, come down. I said, I can. And I'm going to cover three things: Mayor Lucero, President Trump, and newly elected councilors. I've been here about 23 years, run for City Council 4 times and County Commission once. Mayor Lucero was the first person I ran against. Joe and I have become very close friends because his business is right across from where I live, and we talk about everything, including personal things. And a friend is, you open it up. Okay, I always say you can always get another wife, another husband, try to get another best friend. Joe and I are close friends. His father passed away December 4th. His father was a great educator, an Army veteran, and Joe's father is a great man, and great men raise great sons. There will be a rosary at the Catholic Church in Caneos tomorrow night. I believe it's 7. And the next day there'll be a Mass at the same church in Caneos. That'll be at 10 a.m. on Friday. Joe left the town a better place. President Trump's speech today about making Jerusalem the seat for our embassy and the capital, whoever wrote that speech, because remember, presidents pay gifted people to write speeches, whoever wrote that speech knocked it out of the park. Now, those of you who are newly elected to City Council, and those of you who have served, this is how it works. You get the credit for nothing and the blame for everything, and you look in the mirror and say, what I did a good thing, and it isn't like you're making millions of dollars getting hooked up with people in Congress, you know. They become lobbyists, and it's just a turnaround thing. That's Washington. Trust me, they don't give a rat's ass about us. They don't have time for us. So you take care of the Valley, and you have, the Valley is a special place, generation upon generation, all kinds of ethics, all kinds of religions, and the Valley is an interesting place. And the main problem I have here is a 2-lane road and the head-ons. Now, I recently purchased a 2014 Corvette. I was going to buy it at Town and Country. I belong to this Corvette club up in Colorado Springs. And by the way, they were honest up in Colorado Springs at Daniel Chevrolet. In 2018, they could have given me a better deal at Town and Country than I could have got up there. I go to my Corvette meeting, November 2nd. They brought in a special vet, a 2014 that has 6,600 miles on it.
For me, Mr. McCann.
Had 6,600 miles on it, has 600 horsepower, and all real men have 4 Corvettes. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'm out of here. I don't have time.
Thank you. Okay. Staff, do we have any follow-up?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Who? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have one more. Darrell Cooper. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Darrell Cooper. I live at 2315 Thomas Avenue. I wanted to take a moment as a citizen of Alamosa and thank those councilmen that are leaving us tonight for your service. I've never been in that position, but I'm sure it's a tough job, and like Dan said, you take all the blame. But I wanted to recognize them and thank them. I also wanted to congratulate those who have won the election, who will be seated here in a moment, and wanted to congratulate them. And to the new City Council, as you select a person to fill the vacant at-large seat, I would hope that you would consider the wishes of the voters in this past election as you consider who to appoint. And thank you.
Thank you. Staff, any follow-up at all? Okay, thank you. That moves us to the next item on the agenda, and that is consent calendar A. Consent calendar allows multiple actions with one motion. Consent calendar A contains routine items which have been recommended for action by staff or advisory boards. Council may remove a consent calendar item for separate consideration. Tonight we have consent calendar item C2A, October 2017 monthly expenditure report and financial statements, the approval of the minutes of the meeting for November the 15th, 2017, approved minutes of special meeting for November the 27th, 2017, approve the minutes of the special meeting November 29th, 2017, approve the contract with James R. McDonald for the municipal judge services.
Counselor, I move that we approve consent calendar A.
I second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any further discussion? If not, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the ceremonial items. We are going to have the recognition of retiring council members Joseph P. Lucero, Michael Stefano, and Christina Daniels. Holly?
Okay, so if I can have Councilor Daniel and Councilor Stefano come down, I'll present you with your plaque. Mayor Lucero will get his when he returns.
I'm just wondering if I could say a couple of things before that happens. Is that okay?
If Mayor Coleman.
Can I say just a short, I promise it's not long.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to congratulate our two new council members. Mr. Broyles, I appreciate your willingness to serve our ward, so thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to your contributions that you're going to make to City Council. And Mr. Carson, I saw you back there. I wish you the best of luck and anticipate you bringing some really neat perspectives to council, so I'm excited that you two are a part of the team. I also want to congratulate our new mayor. I think you're going to lead the team well. I just wanted to say thank you for 2 terrific years. I've been reflecting on a lot of things that we've accomplished, and I'm pretty thankful that I was able to play a role in these projects. We have the multi-purpose facility, the comprehensive plan, the new planning and zoning code that you guys are going to hopefully approve tonight. It took a lot of time. Adoption of the utility and water rates that will provide needed reserves for the maintenance and upkeep of our infrastructure, the public art display, the hiring of a new judge, the water augmentation, cemetery building, and then all of the grants and collaborations that our team has done. These were very positive projects for the city, and not all of them were easy or simple to get completed. It has been a pleasure to work with all of you to balance the needs of the infrastructure of the city with the realities of our community members. I've been a stickler for not increasing our debt more than we needed to, and I hope that that trend continues. Alamosa is a wonderful city, and I'm looking forward to our continued growth and development. Our team of city staff is wonderful and dedicated, and I appreciate all of their energy and the expertise that they've brought to us. And then I think everybody knows that I've asked to be considered for the at-large seat, and I appreciate you all taking the time to look at all of the applications. I realize the decision will not be easy, so I'm wishing you all the best of luck in that. I am looking forward to interviewing and sharing my thoughts, and I'm hopeful that I will be able to continue to serve with you into 2018. And I just really wanted to thank the community for the opportunity to serve, because it really has been a pleasure and a privilege, and I have appreciated every moment that I've had. So thank you.
I just want to congratulate the new council members also. Mayor, congratulations. I know we're going to move this city forward, and it's been an honor to serve for 4 years. No regrets. Life goes on, and there's better, bigger things up ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council, if you want to come down, you guys can come down as well.
Thank you, though.
Hey, Mike, could you hold on one sec? I'd like to say
He's going to say a few words here in a second. Did you want to go ahead and say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I thought about this today, and I've had the privilege to serve with a few counselors in the last 4 years, and as they move on, I've always said something that I've reflected on, that I learned from them, because I'm still learning at this gig, and I learned so much from the people up here. And just a quick shout out to you all. Greg Gillespie, a couple years ago, I learned a lot about professionalism with this position. Rusty Johnson, I learned a lot about passion for debate and discourse. With Mr. Stefano, I learned and I saw how much he cared and his outlook for children of Alamosa. For Christina Daniel, I admired and I learned a lot about how hard you worked for mental health and social justice, and I really appreciate that. And for outgoing Mayor Lucero, I learned some things about the attention to detail with different issues and things that we come across on a weekly basis. So just again, thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you, Councilman Vigil. Councilor Hensley?
I also would like to thank the outgoing city council members and our mayor. The thing that I look at, I guess I'm starting my third year, been doing this 2 years, and I have learned a lot from everybody. The thing that I feel that Mayor Lucero, or the previous Mayor Lucero, Councilman Stefano, and Councilman Daniel have all in common is a true passion for our city and a true caring, and you can tell that when they make decisions and when they discuss different things that are coming up and different sometimes tough decisions, that truly it's coming from their heart and they really care about the people of Alamosa. And I am very, very honored to have worked with each of you. So I just wanted to let that be known.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. And I too would like to thank Mayor Lucero, Christina Daniels, and Michael Stefano for your service. There's no greater gift that you can give to a community than your community service. And being here on the council, you most definitely get a lot of opportunities to dedicate your time to the community. We are going to miss a lot of the wisdom, knowledge, and insight that you've brought to this council, and we hope that we continue to work with you in some form or some capacity in the future. But thank you, best wishes, and good luck. Next item on the agenda is the oath of office for new councilor members, Jan Vigil, David Brawls, Michael Carson, and myself. Holly?
Okay, so I'll have you come one by one. We'll start with you, Mayor Coleman.
Okay.
You'll come to yours first, and then I'll do Councilor Vigil, then Councilor Broyles, and Councilor Carson.
Okay, you put your hand up. Repeat after me. I, Ty Coleman,
I, Ty Coleman,
subject to the penalties of perjury,
subject to the penalties of perjury,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States, that I will support
and
and uphold the Constitution
uphold the constitutions
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of the state of Colorado,
and of the state of Colorado,
and the charter and ordinances
and the charter and ordinances
of the city of
of the
Alamosa,
city of Alamosa,
and faithfully
the elected council members to say a few words. It seems like we have an audience full of people who are probably your friends and family, and I'll start with Council Member David Broyles.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to thank everyone in this process. I thank the councilors, City Council, and the mayors and the mayor. I want to especially thank our past mayor, Joseph Lucero, and our councilman, Christina Daniels and Michael Stefano. I greatly appreciate your past work and service. I look at it as the building blocks. You know, we're building the blocks, and you've done a great job so far. My expectation of myself is to build those blocks higher, and I think the city of Alamosa is the winners. I've always been for term limits. I think that people should serve for a period of time, and then allow new people to come in. And I think new people are good. I sincerely want to thank, and I look forward to working with Michael Carson, and our new mayor, Ty Coleman, myself, and our new councilor that will appoint. And I also want to thank, I'll enjoy working with Jan Vigil and also with Liz Hensley. I think these are a great councilman, and I'm excited. As I look at Alamosa, you know, I just look at it, it's all about jobs and families. If we can have better jobs, we can have better relations in our families, I think that's the key. And in this 4 years, if in 4 years I look back and everybody's earning more money than they were the 4 prior years, I'll consider that a success. Again, I want to thank my family and friends, and I especially want to thank my wife, Valerie. She cast the one vote, so I thank her. And I thank all of you and the voters in Ward 2. Thank you. It was tough. It was a tough election. I didn't expect the outcome to be by one vote, but it was. But that's a tribute to, I think, you know, the past councilor, Christina Daniels, and what she did for the city. And I thank her again. And I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Broyles. Next, we have Councilor Michael Carson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank all the City Council, first of all, and I look forward to working with everybody, and thank you guys for your service as you're going out. First off, I'd like to thank our Eternal Father for giving me drive, confidence, and knowledge, and all the skills that it's taken to get here. Through him, all things are possible. Secondly, I'd like to thank my fiance Heather and my daughters Michaela and Haley for all their help in putting up with me and all that came along with the election. It was pretty stressful. I'd like to thank the people of Ward 4 and the entire city of Alamosa for the votes and ultimately for trusting me with this great task. And last but not least, I would also like to thank my parents, Geraldine and Lee, and the rest of my family and friends that supported me. I also owe a great deal of appreciation to the people of our city who supported me with, you know, space for signs and banners and all the other stuff. Thank you again very much to everyone. I know this task will not be easy, and I appreciate very much the confidence and in doing it, and I appreciate the job the outgoing councilors have done. I know it's a hard job, and I'll strive to do the best job possible. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councilor Jan Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Just to echo what these two gentlemen have said, thank you to all the voters of Alamosa. It was a tough race. But seriously, thank you for giving me the opportunity again and all those confidence votes. My confidence is really high right now. 4 years ago, I won. I was probably one of the biggest political upsets in Alamosa's history, and you all gave me a chance, and I think I've satisfied what you want, but yet I'm not satisfied, and we're going to keep working hard. I look at our new council now, and we are very diverse, and I think that's a great thing. and we're going to get a lot of work. We're going to get a lot of things done. Like I've said before, I'm not going to promise anything, but I promise to work hard for you, and you can always give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Vigil. About 4 years ago, Mayor Kathy Rogers, Councilman Rusty Johnson, and Councilman Charlie Griego encouraged me to throw my name in the hat for the at-large city council position. At that time, I wasn't for sure if I was city council material or not. I'm thankful that they were able to see something in me that I wasn't quite able to see at the time. I would like to thank my campaign team for working hard to get the positive word out about our commitment, dedication, and vision for the city of Alamosa. I would like to thank my family, friends, co-workers, and community members for supporting me in this campaign. I want to thank the entire City of Alamosa staff for your hard work and commitment to our great city and doing all the wonderful things you do to help this city operate and make it a decent, safe, and affordable place for people to live. I would like to thank everyone for your uplifting words, phone calls, face-to-face conversations, texts, email, Facebook likes, Facebook shares, and comments. I'm looking forward to working with our new council and our existing council to move Alamosa forward and to make this a place to where people would want to come and live. Finally, I would like to thank God and also my mother and my father who were not able to make it here tonight because my mother unfortunately had a stroke about 2 weeks ago, but she had every intention to come. But in her place, my cousin Bobby and his wife Vaughn and my other cousin Michelle from Houston, Texas made it here tonight to celebrate this occasion. And right now, if I could, because I'm afraid with so many people in the audience, I might not call someone's name, but everyone who helped me out in some form, fashion, or way, if you don't mind just standing up, I sure would appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all so very much, my son and my daughter, Giovanni Snowy, and also my girlfriend, Janine. Thank you all for putting up with me during the campaign time with all the things that we had to go through, and I really appreciate all my friends like Sandy, Geneva, Greg, and everyone else in the audience who I may not have mentioned your name. Please forgive me, Roscoe and Marco, and just thank you all so very much, and have a wonderful evening. All righty. Next on the agenda is the introduction of Mark Wright, our new Public Works Director. Heather? Testing. Testing, testing. Here you go, Heather.
You want to go up there? So tonight we have our new Public Works Director with us, Mr. Mark Wright. He actually began on the 29th. We're very excited to have him on board with us. He comes with a very strong background. While he may not have held an actual Public Works Director position, the combination of his public work and his private work covers almost all the different areas that he will be responsible for. So we're very excited to have someone with Mark's background. Mark and his family actually live in La Jera, so I think he's excited to be working closer to home. Previous to joining the City of Alamosa, Mark worked for the state of Utah as an environmental scientist. He also has experience as senior engineer, senior construction engineer, project manager, senior highway design engineer, county engineer, community development director, and engineer for the Utah Department of Transportation. Mark, if you want to turn your mic on, if it will, if you want to provide anything else from an informational perspective.
Yeah.
I just want to say to everybody that I am extremely happy to be here serving friends and family. I have worked 24 years outside the valley and commuted back to the valley. And to be here and serve you, use my talents and skills to serve family and friends, it's like a dream. And I'm very ecstatic to be here. And I just want to say my welcome to all of you. Glad to be here. And thank you, Heather, for this opportunity.
Leave that over there for the public. Thank you.
Council, does anyone have anything they would like to say? Okay. Well, Mark, I would like to thank you for joining our team. And I talked with Heather earlier today, and she went over your resume and went over a lot of the accomplishments that you have achieved in your life. And I believe that we're going to be extremely fortunate to have you on our team as we move forward in the future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I want to add, now that I'm back at the mic, is I feel like I'm having to follow in a giant's footsteps with Pat. I'm a big guy, but he's left an amazing team for me to build upon, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our oath of office for our municipal judge, James R. McDonald. Please join us up here. Thank you. Holly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you want him to talk about himself, but he could probably do that after he does his oath.
That'd be good. Would you like me to hold the mic for you?
Up. Okay. How are you? Okay, so we're going to do your oath right now so you can start working for us. If you want to hold your right hand up and repeat after me. I, James R. McDonald.
I, James R. McDonald.
Subject to the penalties of perjury.
Subject to the penalties of perjury.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully perform.
That I will faithfully perform.
The duties of the position.
The duties of the position.
Of municipal judge.
Of municipal judge.
For the city of Alamosa.
For the city of Alamosa.
Colorado.
Colorado.
In accordance with the laws.
In accordance with the laws.
Of the United States.
Of the United States.
And of the state of Colorado.
And of the state of Colorado.
And the charter and ordinances.
And the charter and ordinances.
Of the city of Alamosa.
Of the city of Alamosa. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to come over here and tell them a little bit about yourself, you can. And I need your signature here, too.
She's taking care of me already.
Thank you, sir.
And I will try to speak without the mic. I'm not a mic guy. Thank you to the City Council for the opportunity to serve the Alamosa community. I've been the Gunnison Municipal Judge since I was appointed May of 2005. I've lived in Gunnison since 2001. I went to school in Vermont for my graduate work. I'm from California originally. Don't tell anyone, please. I wish my wife could be here, my daughters could be here. They're at home in Gunnison. I thank them for everything that I have here. Without them, I could not be serving Gunnison or Alamosa. I don't know many of you, or quite frankly, any of you at present. I look forward to the opportunity to meet and learn to grow and love this community. I'm amazed at the warmth in this room. For the last half an hour, I've been sitting in the back and not knowing anyone, a complete outsider, I've just felt the sense of community. And I look forward to the opportunity to serve this community. So let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, do you have any comments for Judge McDonald?
Sorry. Yes.
Council, any comments? No? Go ahead.
I'll just say welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
Judge McDonald, I would like to thank you so very much. You know, we had to interview quite a few candidates, and I must say you did an extremely great job of interviewing, and we're looking forward to you utilizing the tools that we've implemented in our toolbox for justice to make a big difference here in our community when it comes to issues of law.
I'm hoping we all have the opportunity to work together towards that end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Adams State Cross Country Day Proclamation. Do we have the Adams State Cross Country
Larry,
team?
if you want to come on up.
Yeah, you want to come.
Now would be the time.
If you could, just come up to the mic and tell us a little bit about the cross country team.
Oh, you can't hear me. I can brag about our cross-country team. You know, Damon won't. I am the athletic director at Adams State, and Damon Martin is the living local legend. We'll put a statue up of him one of these days as well with Coach Vigil. But as you are well aware, just recently the cross-country team won 2 national championships. And we've kind of asked for a day of proclamation, petitioned Heather and the mayor. They not only bring outstanding reputation for our university and our athletic department, but as you know, for the community as well. We're very proud of them. That's 54 national titles that they've won, and they brought great exposure, and they do it in a very dignified way. They're some of our best students on campus, and so we just want to recognize him at this time and turn it over to the powers that be.
Thank you so very much. Thank you very much. Council, any comments?
Before we read the proclamation, Larry, did you want to invite them as well? Was there going to be a presentation?
You bet. So on Friday, we have home basketball games at Plocky Hall on the campus. We play Western State, and where's the judge that was from Gunnison? You know, he's gone. That's good. We can talk about him, but no. So Friday at the halftime of the men's basketball game, it'll be a great crowd, but we are recognizing our cross-country teams, and we'd like the city and the mayor to invite everybody to be there. I believe Congressman Tipton's representative will be there to do a congressional recognition as well, and it'll be a big night. Just come to watch the event, but at the halftime of that, we are going to be officially recognizing our cross-country programs at halftime and invite the community to be there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. With that being said, I will read the Adams State Cross Country Day Proclamation. December the 8th, 2017, whereas Adams State's men's and women programs have recently won 2 national titles in cross country, and whereas the running programs have won 54 national titles, and whereas the running programs have brought recognition and honor to the community of Alamosa. Now, therefore, I, Ty Coleman, Mayor of Alamosa, Colorado, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim December the 8th, 2017 as Adams State Cross Country Day in the city of Alamosa, Colorado. Further, I encourage all citizens of the city of Alamosa to support the celebration and corresponding activities given under my hand and the seal of the city of Alamosa this 8th day of December 2017. Now, I will sign this, but I would like for Councilor Hensley to present it to you with the rest of council, because Councilor Hensley also works at Adams State as well, University. Okay. Would you like to say something? Anyone?
I was just going to add something really quick. I am very proud to be part of Adams State, and I am proud of everything you've done in your years with the cross country and track team. The other thing I want to add is all of these runners that have won these national titles are student athletes, and what phenomenal students they are. I'm in my 10th year at Adams State as a professor, and I've worked with a lot of the students, and you bring in really class people, and I'm honored to be able to work with them and what great people they are.
Councilman Vigil?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick word. I've also, I used to be an assistant coach for the women's basketball team at Adams State, and I worked there 3 years. But I saw firsthand what Coach Martin does with his group every year. And it's just amazing how hard they work to be this good. And I don't know if a lot of you know, but Coach Martin always doesn't recruit the best runner. He always recruits the hardest worker. And that's just awesome. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad to see Alamosa starting to embrace the cross-country tradition that this university has established over the last few years.
Thank you.
Coach Martin.
There you go.
Coach Martin, again, I want to recognize, thank you for what you've done. I don't know how you do it. To be a good coach in anything is extraordinary. So good job. And you've brought a lot of recognition. I know you've helped a lot of students. And I've watched you over the years, and I applaud you for your dedication and what you've done with the cross country. Thank you.
And I too, Coach Martin, would like to thank you for all the hard work that you put into your teams. And I would like to speak on another note. I went to one of the cross-country events that you had once at the golf course, and I was driving through town, and I noticed all these different buses from all these different schools coming in and bringing that revenue into our community. What you're doing is an economic driver as well. So continue to do that, because that not only strengthens our community as far as our regular community, but it also strengthens our business community. So thank you so very much. Okay.
Hey, Jan.
Okay, now we have regular business brought forward by city staff. First order of business is from the Public Works Department.
Mayor, this is consideration of adoption of Alamosa's new Unified Development Code. This is ordinance number 33, 2017, before council on second reading and public hearing tonight. So what I thought we would do is staff will give a brief overview of what the ordinance is about, just to remind us all where we sit. The first reading was last month. And I'll have Todd Messenger, who has been the driving force behind development of this Unified Development Code, will give an overview of where that sits. But before we get into that, just a bit of a roadmap for what is needing to be accomplished tonight. This ordinance needs to be adopted by the end of the year. In order to meet the requirements of planning grants that we received for both development of this ordinance and development of the new comprehensive plan. The new comprehensive plan, you will recall, was adopted by the Planning Commission on January 25th and ratified by you as council on February 15th. Now we are polishing up the Unified Development Code. There are a number, well, I should say a handful of items that we want to highlight for you and bring to your specific attention for deliberation. Some of them may be able to be addressed tonight. Some of them we may find in our discussion tonight would entail further thinking. And if that's the case, what I would recommend is that we adopt the code tonight with whatever changes are addressable tonight. And if there are further changes that we want to make to the code is just an ordinance, and we amend ordinances all the time. In fact, we fully expect to be amending this development code over the course of the next couple of years as we implement it and become familiar with its workings as they go forward. So after the overview by Todd, I will highlight what those issues are, or Todd may actually touch on what those issues that we want to bring to your attention are, and then I would suggest we open the discussion up for the public hearing, because there may be other matters for your attention that are raised by comments at the public hearing, and then of course it will return to council for discussion.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, Todd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Eric. I guess we have a PowerPoint that we can show real quick, and that does highlight, and Eric, we can tag team on those if we don't have to be formal, if you have anything that you want to bring up at any point.
Tag teaming should work very well, Todd. Thank you.
Great. So we're very pleased to be here for second reading of the new Unified Development Code. It was a great pleasure working with you and the city on this project, and for those of you who are new to council, this is a pretty important decision that you'll be making tonight. We hope to answer any questions that you may have to make you comfortable as you cast your vote this evening. So short history, the city hired RPI Consulting to do the comprehensive plan, downtown needs assessment and code assessment and correction project, it was called, in November 2015. At the time, RPI had a guy on staff who could write code. He ended up taking a better job before the code project started, and Gabe called me. We're good friends, we go way back, and the city approved my coming in as a subcontractor, and we're very, very pleased that we're able to provide these services to the city. So we subcontracted in August 2016. We presented a strategic assessment of your current code that kind of discussed how it would be, either it does implement your new plan or it doesn't, and what can be done to it to make it more effective as an ordinance. Then we had committee meetings from November 2016 into March of 2017. We had a joint City Council Planning Commission workshop on August 30th, 2017, and then we proceeded into the Planning Commission recommendation and first reading, and we'll get to those in a second. But with respect to that strategic assessment, that really set out what are we trying to achieve in this project. I always like to translate between a comprehensive plan and a new land development code with something written in English that everybody can understand that says this is what we're going to do when we write this more technical piece that spans more than 200 pages. So the strategic assessment had 11 recommendations for how to implement the comprehensive plan, and it had 8 recommendations for just making the code better. For those results, we got to, recommendations were to use a community character approach, so we did that, and basically that says community character being a balance of landscaping and buildings and asphalt. How do we use that as our underlying regulatory approach so that everything comes in with that understanding? We created that. We created a new zone for downtown Alamosa called CBD, or Central Business District, so that we could protect its unique character. We created a new zone for established neighborhoods right around the downtown to allow for some more flexibility there and encourage reinvestment in existing homes. We created a new zone for campuses, and you'll see that in the zoning map as we go through. We created a transitional zone, or we suggested creating a transitional zone, and then we reevaluated that and decided a mixed-use zone for developing areas would actually be more useful to the city than a transitional zone. We updated the land use table to modernize all the land uses and make it easier to do business in Alamosa. And we defined every single land use that's in that land use table. And then we provided standards for evaluating and allowing new uses that aren't currently listed. So if somebody comes in with something off the wall, you have a way of actually allowing that without doing a code amendment first. We reallocated all the land uses in the land use table because we had a bunch of new zones, so we had to say what uses were allowed in the new zones as well as the old ones. We revised and we recalibrated the parking standards so that they were more in line with what other jurisdictions are doing and what we understand to work. We improved the landscape standards for non-residential development, so you have more trees and parking lots going forward. You have more buffer yards in between uses that otherwise might struggle with each other's existence. We created standards for fences and garden walls. We understand that there were some landowners that wanted to use Buicks as fences, for example, and there was a notion that the fences should be composed of traditional fencing materials. We wanted to blend zoning, subdivision signs, and annexation into one code. We did that. We reorganized the code so it would be intuitively accessible, and we standardized the review process. So you put your project in the hopper, and it comes out either administratively or through the Planning Commission or through the City Council, but it all goes down the same type of approval path. Another thing that we endeavor to do is make as many decisions as possible at the staff level, subject to standards that the council is comfortable with. That really improves the efficiency of the development review process and allows businesses to open faster. It allows real estate deals to close faster, and it allows people to get on with the work that they want to do. We wanted to reduce the time between application and approval, and one of the ways we did that is making all these administrative approvals. But also we found efficiencies in the system that we could exploit, and we made the application to approval time faster in all cases. We revised the land dedication and fee in lieu provisions. We calibrated approval and approval durations to the pace of growth, which historically hasn't been explosive. So we want to make sure that we understand how long these approvals last, and we make them last a little longer than some other municipalities might do. And we updated the sign regulations so that they comply with a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that made most sign codes in Colorado unconstitutional. So the adoption hearings, 9/27 was a Planning Commission, 11/1 was first reading, tonight is second reading, and January 1st of 2018 is the suggested effective date, which would give staff a chance to, you have new staff now as well, take a chance to read through it more and to develop application forms and checklists and so forth for administering the code. So key items, we had some conversations in between first and second reading. We made some revisions, but there were some key items that we wanted to make sure that council understood moving forward so that you wouldn't be caught by surprise. One issue that was of concern to staff was the ability to do murals. And right now in table 214702A, there are limitations on wall signs. And if you really want to do murals, then you have to open up the wall. And under the First Amendment, you can't say that a mural is acceptable if it's art, but it's not acceptable if it says "Have a nice day." So you can't be a censor of that product before it goes out. There are a couple ways to deal with that. If you want to have a public art program, you can start buying easements on walls, if you will, and then approving the art and funding it. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is to say, you know, the side walls of buildings in certain zones are fair game, and you can paint over the whole thing whatever you want. And sometimes that'll be really cool, and you have some examples of that in town, I think, and other municipalities can show the same. And sometimes it could be really offensive because the First Amendment allows us to be really ugly if we want to be, as long as we don't hit certain thresholds for that. So we throw that open for consideration, and if Eric has anything to add.
Nope, that's good intro.
So right now we don't allow 100% of a sidewall to be painted with a mural. It's a mural and a wall sign are the same, and you know there's a percentage, and it's not necessarily very large. If you want to have a mural program, we would have to up that percentage and take some risk.
What do you mean up what percentage?
So right now the wall sign can occupy a certain percentage of the wall, and it's not big enough to be a traditional mural. It's more for business identification or whatever else you know that business owner wants to say or that landowner wants to say. But if you wanted to allow any business owner that had or you know homeowner or whatever institutional use in residential zone, we can cut it up a little bit to paint the sidewall of a building however they want, then you could do that, and some municipalities have done that. You know, the risk of somebody doing something truly offensive on their own property is usually rather low. We trust that people have some sense of civic pride and ownership, but it is what it is. We're allowed to kind of do what we want once we open the door.
We'll get into that with some specific examples that are in the Novus materials, I think, after public comment, as we will with one or more of these various issues that we want to talk about. We'll get into depth after public comment.
Thank you. The other issue was landscape species diversification in section 215302. We had Basically, the landscaping requirements require a diverse set of trees if you're going to plant trees as required by the code. And the reason for that is when you have, for example, a blight for a certain species, you don't want it to take out all the trees in your whole city. So you want to have some species diversity when somebody builds a project that requires landscaping. We had a certain minimum threshold for that, and the tree board recommended increased diversity, so we incorporated that recommendation in the code, and we just wanted you to be aware of it. So when somebody plants out, for example, a parking lot in a big retail center, or plants a buffer yard in between an industrial use and a residential one, it's going to be quite diverse, the types of trees and species that go into that buffer yard in order to prevent a blight from taking the whole buffer yard out. And we thank the tree board for their input on that. We wanted you to be aware of the change. Parking lot landscaping, we have a requirement in the code that if your parking lot is larger than 16 spaces, then it has to include some trees. The tree board recommended that if a parking lot is larger than 10 spaces, then it should start to have to include trees. And we put that up for council in that it's more expensive to create those landscaped areas and to irrigate them and to put the curbing around them to protect them from the cars that are backing out and moving around. And we think at 16, that's a certain size of business that's going to require that much parking. And at 10, we start to get into a threshold of maybe affecting a small business in a way that the city might not intend. Our direction was, I wrote the Durango Code as well, which is very tree intensive, and the community's used to that and wanted that. And there was big consensus. What I was told is we want something between what we have now, which is no requirement, and Durango, but kind of closer to where we are now so we can ease into it. If that's where we are, then 16 is probably where you want to be. If you want to move it down a little bit more and make the city more attractive and be able to deal with stormwater runoff a little bit better and incrementally ratchet that up, you could go to 10. We'll write it however the council wants. We don't have strong feelings about that. That's really a balancing act for the council to decide.
As part of that, in our discussion at the staff level with Todd earlier today, Pat shared that there are a lot of developments that would fit into that window of between 10 and 16. In other words, a lot that would be affected if we were to drop the threshold limit down to 10 from where it sits currently at 16.
You picture a lot of small retail and restaurant users who would fall into that space. There are, in your current annexation requirements, there's a whole bunch of detail about water. Because annexation was one of those few areas where the city can just say, this is what we're going to require, take it or leave it, we made that a lot simpler. And basically, if the city wants water, then they can demand it on annexation. And if the city doesn't want those water rights because it can't use them or whatever, depending on what they're decreed for, then the city can say, well, we don't have to do that. So we just put in sort of a checklist of things that need to be included in the annexation agreement. We didn't require the city by ordinance to take any particular action or direction on it, and we left it open-ended enough where the city can make unique requirements for unique developments. You really can't control your future annexations anyway with an ordinance, because every annexation that comes in is its own ordinance, but this helps to guide that decision-making process. We wanted you to be aware of the balance of staff versus planning commission approvals, because when we said that when we were going to make as many things as administrative as possible, we meant it. So every time you look at a land use table in this code and you see allowed or limited, those are all staff level approvals. And almost everything that we put in there is a staff level approval. And when it has a limited use, it means there are some certain extra standards that apply to it. And we would encourage you all to look at those and make sure that you're comfortable with those. But we really wanted to make sure that things could move through that process in the most efficient way. And we tried to tack standards onto them to make sure they would be acceptable to the community and to their neighbors. And the other big thing that comes up is that a lot of approvals that used to come before council for the more difficult stuff, we now have the Planning Commission deciding. So anything that used to be a special use, now we have the Planning Commission deciding that as a conditional use. Now, some of the special uses became staff approvals, and some of them became conditional uses. And what would happen is staff would make a recommendation, Planning Commission would approve it, and then it would come up on your consent agenda, and a majority of the council, unlike normal consent agenda items, it would take a majority of the council to pull it off if you wanted to reconsider and reverse it. And so that's a ratification process instead of a further approval process. And an applicant can come in and sit down, and when you get past consent agenda, they can go home knowing that they have an approval that they can use. It shaves some of the time off. It shaves some of the preparation costs off. If they have attorneys involved, it saves them a bunch of attorney's fees. So it's a really practical way to make sure that you have oversight and that you're seeing this stuff as it bubbles up, but to make sure that you don't have to have a whole bunch of extra hearings and staff reports and that kind of stuff that comes with it. We recommend that over time you consider taking that ratification process and sunsetting it. We don't have a sunset clause in there now, but we figure between 18 months and 2 years out, if you're not comfortable with the processes, then you can amend them. But that ratification process allows you to monitor it in the meantime. And the accountability that you feel as council members, you can be accountable using that ratification process. So that's the conditional use decisions ratification. The zoning map has a couple of new districts, and we'll show you those at the end of the slideshow, and we'll show you how we applied those. I think there might be another couple of tweaks on the zoning map that could be potentially looked at. But in the meantime, we've tried to map out the city in a way that'll work. So some changes since first reading. There was a request to allow campgrounds in the commercial business zone. We allowed them in the commercial business zone as a limited use with some design guidelines, not terribly onerous, but some things that must be done. We implement most of the tree board recommendations. That 10 to 16 parking space is something that we bring for your consideration tonight. We simplify the regulations on short-term rentals, which is like the VRBOs and Airbnb and that kind of stuff. We had originally followed the Denver model, which was you have to be an owner-occupied unit in order to have a VRBO. So you have to live there during the week and rent it during the weekend, something like that. That's really hard to enforce. And since it hasn't been a problem in Alamosa historically, we took it out so that you don't have to worry about that in the enforcement side. We standardized all the notice periods to 14 days, so if the city issues a notice during the week to somebody for code enforcement or something else, the notice will expire always on a weekday, so that there's no delays over the weekend or whatever. We clarified the administrative appeal process, so if somebody gets a decision that they don't like, or the neighboring property gets an approval that the neighbors don't like, they can take an administrative approval. We made that process a little bit more clear about what those steps are. And then there's a whole bunch of, when you write a 200-some-odd page document and you read it again and again and again, you always find other stuff that you can clean up, and we went through and made sure we had all consistent vocabulary. There were a couple of definitions we needed to add. We filled out some things on our acronyms table and so forth. So we think it's in really good shape at this point. So this is the zoning map, and some of you know that if you see a presentation from me, it's got to have some gratuitous animation in it, and so we've provided that this evening. We've got the new mixed-use zone, which is all vacant right now, but could develop into a lifestyle center or a vertically mixed-use or a horizontally mixed-use project. We've got the new zone for campus, and there's a couple little dots of campus in other locations as well, and there may be a few more introduced, but principally the university on this map. The new CBD zone in the downtown, and then north and south of downtown in those established residential neighborhoods, we have the new EN, or established neighborhood zone. And that's all we have for a show. And we're happy to answer any questions, or we can answer questions after public hearing, however you'd like to handle it.
Thank you, Todd.
Mr. Mayor.
Can Council add?
Quick question. Probably after the public hearing, can we get that map up again and zoom in a little bit? That was kind of hard to read.
Sure. Yeah, you can do it now if you had questions about it, or we can actually leave it up and have the public hearing.
It might be helpful to put the PDF up, because the PowerPoint one is all reduced and pixelated.
I will find it and we can get it up.
Okay, at this time, we would like to open it up for a public hearing. Yes, please walk up to the mic, state your name and...
Adam Moore, 117 Edison Avenue here in Alamosa. And I'm also on the Alamosa Tree Board and also a certified arborist, which basically means I can bore you to death with talking about trees if you want. Now, if I had remembered my civics lessons from high school, I would have known to have gotten you comments earlier than today, but I didn't. So I'm going to go through some stuff today, and if you've already seen these, Eric, then feel free to pass me on at any of these points. Just a couple items. These are all going to be related to trees, since I deal with trees. In some of the areas, such as where it talks about, oh gosh, do you want me to reference this by numbers or?
You know, Adam, you could do that, but I think you've got that all written down, and I would appreciate it, and I'm sure council would appreciate it if you would just leave us with your written comments or email them to us. So I don't think we want to work through the nitty-gritty of all the numbers tonight.
Are these the ones you submitted through the website? Or is that what you're going through right now?
I submitted them through the website, and I also sent an email directly to Eric since I couldn't include an attachment on the website.
So we do have it. If you're reading off of that, we do have it. You don't need to leave anything extra. And so you can move, you don't have to reference as much as, I guess, the answer to your question.
Okay. So I'll keep it short and simple then. I think it's a good step forwards. It gets us in some positive directions with other communities. I do have some concerns with it. Part of which being that I'm sure that Mark Wright has a great background, and we heard a little bit about that today. And I know public works directors are, they have to know a lot about a lot of things, and usually they're not experts on trees. And so I would definitely encourage further consultation with either the tree board or certified arborists or some type of certified horticulturist as you need to review some of these projects going forwards. And one of the things that I had a question on that I don't feel like was addressed well in here is basically what is keeping trees from being cut down in town? What is to keep people on Main Street from cutting all the trees down on Main Street, or keeping Trinidad State from cutting down all of their trees and not replacing anything if they're not doing any further development? So I feel like something like that should be addressed, or else we could have a decrease in trees despite the methods that have been added to increase the trees in the city. And I will leave it at that then, since you guys have a bunch of my comments. Do you have any questions on my comments I submitted then?
I mean, if you have other comments, council hasn't seen those, I don't think, so you should probably hit those. What I was trying to avoid was getting into the nitty-gritty detail of which section and going word by word in there about anything. But I think it would be helpful for council if you would hit what your comments are. Okay,
thank you. Sorry about that misunderstanding. There's a couple spots where it's in here where it specifies some means, for example, on how trees are to be planted, how trees are supposed to be preserved if there's construction going on around them. And a simple, they're just mentioned in terms of how to do it. And this is not related to any of the particular ones, because this is just what I happen to have at home for bedtime reading for myself. But there's publications out there. This is ANSI A300 Part 3, Standard Practices for Supplemental Support Systems for Trees. You don't address that, but there's also ones, these for planting, for pruning, for care of trees during construction. And I think referencing documents like this is a better format, because these are continually updated. And then as science changes, these get changed, and you don't have to worry about going back and checking and changing the ordinances as things move forwards. Let's see. I like the idea of the tree preservation credit. It's the ratios you have of one tree for 10 inches, 2 trees for 15 inches is good for credit for the city. What I would also encourage is to also have that in reverse, where if somebody's going to remove trees, that they need to replace trees at a ratio as well. So you can either make another column for another ratio. So, because if somebody was to remove numerous large trees and just replace them with one tiny tree, you're not getting the same benefit. And so I would encourage having something in there about if you're going to remove trees, trees need to be replaced as well. And then also with that, consider changing the ratios so that it matches both, or to make another column for ratios that is for the replacement instead of just the preservation of trees. And I made some suggestions on numbers with that. And then there's a part on waiver or reduction of tree planting requirements. And I don't think that anybody should be given the opportunity to waive or reduce the number of trees that they need to plant on their property. If there's not space for the trees on their property, then they either need to select different trees that don't take up as much space, or perhaps the city should consider, if you need to have 8 trees around your parking lot, you only have space for 6, you still need to plant 8 trees in town. Just 2 of those need to be somewhere else on city property, so that we're still getting the benefit of those trees in the city of Alamosa, and the citizens are receiving that benefit. Let's see. I think that about covers it. I have a few questions that I don't quite understand on it as well. And maybe I would, if I read the whole document, I would have understood. I didn't read the glossary either. But on one section it asks, what is, it mentions about substantial modifications. I'm not sure what a substantial modification is. And if you're not, modifications to non-residents where it doesn't expand the floor by more than 10% they don't need to plant additional trees. As you know, you can do a complete remodel of the inside of a house and spend of a business and spend $500,000 on it. That to me is substantial, but they haven't modified the footprint. And so why just beautify the inside when you can also beautify the outside as well? And then I would also encourage adding some pictures in here, because it was very difficult for me to understand some of the concepts of the spacing between the parking lots and the types of curves for where trees would go. So drawings would be useful for people to understand. And let's see, I think that covers it. Any questions for me?
Council, any question? Okay. No questions for you, Adam. Thank you so very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for your consideration.
All right, you're welcome. Okay. Yes, any other comments, please? If you can come up to the mic and state your name. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marilyn Loser. I live at 507 Pikes Peak in Alamosa, and I am chair of the tree board. And I want to say a couple of background comments. One is, earlier tonight it was reported that the tree board suggested, and that was not the case. It was Marilyn, a member of the tree board, suggested, and here's the reason. I did not know about this unified code until near the end of October. And it's not that I didn't care. Somehow I didn't hear about it. In fact, the tree board came to City Council January of 2013 requesting having landscaping for small parking lots and smaller businesses. I had only one more follow-up meeting after that and was told down the road they'd be working on that. That's 4.5 years ago, and no one had contacted anyone on the tree board. So I won't tell you my first reaction, but it was not positive. So I did spend a great deal of time going through those 267 pages, and you know, I honor anyone who can really read that stuff. Anyway, I'm not trying to make light of this. So we did have a tree board meeting the week after I first learned of this. We discussed it, but we did not have enough background of reading it to come together to project our ideas as a group. So I went through it very carefully. I sent out my comments to the tree board, and I made use of the online submission, which I really appreciated, and tried to do it ahead of time so that it could be looked at. I really appreciate that the comments were taken seriously and many were addressed. I would like to say the one that came up tonight about the number of parking spaces, when the tree board came to City Council January of 2013, we had suggested any businesses have with 5 or more parking spaces. And we didn't just kind of pull that out of the hat, because yes, I'm a tree hugger. I gotta admit that, I am. However, we looked at Salida, we looked at Pueblo, we looked at Saguache, we looked at what other places did. Pueblo, for instance, does have 5. So when I read the suggestion was 16, I feel 10 would be good. And I know this may sound a little funny, but when I drive around town, and in years past, all of the ugly parking lots are just very distressing to me. We need a nice-looking city. Yes, we have to work harder at it here, but it is important. I'd like to live in a beautiful place. I've lived here a lot of years and want to continue. So I'm thinking of both the city, I'm also thinking of myself. Again, we discussed it at the tree board meeting today and decided that we would come forward as individuals because some people didn't have time to read it. There was a general feeling this was a good thing, but we didn't have time to say, okay, we're going to vote on this, this, and this. So that's why I wanted to make sure you knew that I do take it seriously. I spent a lot of time over the last 9 years thinking about trees and learning about them and about our town. I mean, I've lived here a number of years and want to continue. So I appreciate the unified code. This is wonderful. I appreciate the changes that have been made, and I would also appreciate having the parking lot number of spaces be that you need tree landscaping for be less than 16. And so thank you for your consideration. I appreciate this.
Thank you very much. Council, do you have any comments? No? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to comment during this public hearing? If so, please feel free to approach the podium.
Thank you, I'm Ruthie Brown. And I couldn't read that report either, Marilyn, so you're not alone. That was, I tried, I looked at it, I searched, and I got lost, and it's a lot. I would first of all commend Adam and Marilyn for trying to get our town a little prettier. And cutting back on trees is, if someone's going to spend $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 on a business, $100, $200 on a tree is not too much. And it can be done in Alamosa, and it can be done right, and it can be done with low water. So you really need to look at that. And beyond that, I could take you all over town when you've approved, when somehow zoning or whatever, when you make someone put in trees to get their construction approved and a parking lot or by the lumber yard, there's a barrier there. If you don't make people keep the trees alive or replace them if they die, who cares? You know, Safeway had to put a bunch in, and they were all torn out when things were developed. Like I say, the lumber yard. What's left at Sonic Burger? How many things are just dying and left to die, and we don't go back and make them repair that or replace? It should be, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, forever. Someone should have to double check on that. On the code or on whatever you're doing, what is the easiest way to find out how my area is affected with this code, with this booklet, with this 280 pages? because I don't have time to read it all. I don't have time, and I don't want to take everyone else's time up, but how do I find out what changes are made in this booklet to 8th and State, to 7-Eleven State, to the laundromat, to the gas stations? How do we know what's going to happen to us in the future, and what should we be aware of? Is there a search we can do? Do we have to come in and meet the new Public Works Director and bug him for a few hours? Because it's a hard thing to read, so I know you got to approve it for reasons, but I sure hope you're open to suggestions and changes if the need arises. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other, Council, do you have any comments in regards? Yes, go ahead,
I have a
Councilor
question.
Brown.
Are the new ordinances, are they, in other words, existing businesses and so forth, are they grandfathered in if there's a change in ordinance?
Okay.
For zoning, existing businesses are always grandfathered in. And in particular, this code, as Todd was mentioning, develops a new zone called an established neighborhood zone, which recognizes neighborhoods as they've grown up for neighborhoods that are established, and not only grandfathers them, but recognizes them as compliant with the standards of that neighborhood.
So the changes are mostly for any new development or any new businesses, parking lots, so.
Please, Todd.
Yes, there's a thing called a nonconformity, which is where it was allowed, and then the code comes in, and for whatever reason now it's not. And with respect to all different types of nonconformities, this code is very generous in that it doesn't cause any kind of heartburn, and you can continue that use and improve it, forever. So, unlike codes that would say if it's destroyed, then it can't come back, that kind of stuff, it's much more lenient on those things than many codes are. So there are, if it's wiped out and it doesn't come back for a year, then the next thing that comes in has to conform. But we try to take into account the fact that when you're trying to create a zoning code for a whole city, there's always going to be that one thing that, the first thing out of the box is going to be the thing that challenges it the most that you didn't expect. And so we want to make sure that we're not creating undue burdens in that respect.
Mayor, I don't know if you want to go back to the public hearing.
Yes, if we could.
For sure.
All right, are there any other comments in the public hearing? Okay, if not, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. Eric?
Councilor Vigil, we have the a little bit more expanded view, and I can expand certain areas even further of the map if there were any particular issues you wanted to explore with that.
Can you kind of explain you mentioned the established neighborhood? What does that entail? What's allowed there? What's not allowed there? Stuff like that.
Sure. So the established neighborhoods are the areas that are in brown right around the central business district and the main thoroughfares in the city. The traditional town lots, if you will, that have been assembled or disassembled over the years. Some of them have really small bungalows. Some of them have larger homes. Some of them have multifamily uses on them. And what the code does is it says what you've got is conforming. So your lot, if it's real small, we're not going to say it's not going to, you can build a house on it, no matter how narrow it was. If you wanted to re-subdivide and create new lots, they would have to meet certain minimum standards. But as it is, nobody's going to tell you that your lot is unlawful in some way. And generally speaking, banks don't like to hear the word non-conforming because they think it puts their assets at risk. And so it makes it easier for people to get loans to do things. And the other thing is that we understand that when you have an existing building, when you want to improve or expand on that building, a lot of times you have to go out into side yards or front yards or whatever. So we create a lot of flexibility for people to do that without having to go and ask for a variance. So one of my favorite jokes for situations like this is Jerry Seinfeld observed that more people are afraid of public speaking than death. So at any given funeral, more people would rather be in the coffin than delivering the eulogy. And yet we ask our neighbors to come up and ask permission to do things that they should be able to do on their house without doing that. And a lot of people won't make those investments if they have to go and ask publicly for them and go through that process. So we have a staff-driven process for people to do those things.
If I'm reading this map correctly, the Central Business District, is that also known as a downtown business district?
It is downtown.
Okay.
The Central Business District is what Gabe Preston from RPI had identified as sort of the core area of downtown.
And it goes 4 blocks east to west?
Yeah. Yep, that's where the buildings are right up on the street. You've got a lot of historic facades and so forth.
Okay.
That's where the design guidelines applied previously from your old code. We got rid of all the guidelines and we created standards instead. So there isn't any sort of wishy-washy language in there anymore.
And it goes 2 blocks north of 160?
2 blocks.
Am I seeing that correctly?
It runs between 4th and 6th.
Okay.
So a block north and a block south, right?
And then it's between, I believe that's Denver and Edison.
Okay.
And then around it is all business district. So it continues to have a commercial character, but you notice that the historic storefront quality to it starts to diminish as you get away from that area. And so Gabe had identified that is your true historic downtown, and we wanted to protect that with its own zone.
Okay. Thank you.
Have we addressed, okay, I was going to ask you the question. Have we addressed the issue of when someone has to plant any forms of trees or plants or scrubs? Do they have to replace them or keep them alive for a certain time period? That was mentioned a little bit earlier. Is that addressed in the document?
You'd normally address that. Let me do a quick keyword search, and I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
I would hate to give the wrong answer on a question that important. Okay.
Council, while Todd's doing his keyword search so that we take the looking over his shoulder pressure off of him, do you want to address this 10 versus 16 parking lot threshold question tonight, or is that so have further discussion of that tonight, or is that something that you would want to consider after adoption of the code, consider as an amendment to the code at some future, presumably near future date, maybe after further consideration of comments, of Adam's written comments or any other information?
Council, what are your thoughts? Okay, Councilor Carson?
I think that particular issue could probably be dealt with after adoption, because I personally would like to go gauge a parking lot and see what 10 spaces versus 16 spaces look like, and you know, I'd rather take some time to look at that personally. I don't know if I speak for anyone else, but I really would.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Brawls?
Yeah, I have a question. When I was looking at this, see if I can explain this correctly. Why the area on east of State Street on east of State Avenue and just directly north of 8th Street, you go on east there. Why is that not included? That gray area is there. Why is it not included in commercial business? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
That's industrial.
No.
The gray area?
Right here. Oh, that's industrial?
That's industrial. Yeah, that's the train yard, and I don't know what else is in there, but that's zoned industrial.
Oh, so that's what you did it for, is with the tree?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions, Councilor Broyles? Nope. Okay. Councilman Vigil?
Thank you. Are there special perks or advantages from being, can you scroll down on that map real quick so I can read the legend? Are there special perks or advantages to being in the central business district as opposed to commercial business?
There's two issues that are different between them. One is commercial business anticipates like a front field parking lot and the building back behind the parking. Your traditional downtown is the buildings right up on the street and what a lot of urban planners would call the pedestrian-friendly environment. So you go from motor vehicle-oriented in CB to pedestrian-oriented in CBD. So it's where the buildings are placed. Currently, you have design guidelines for the downtown, which is currently a portion of the business district. So you've got some really odd overlapping regulations. We stripped all that away and we just turned them into standards for that zone instead, so that you don't have to worry about the conflicts between the two. And then the other thing is that we have two different types of retail that we identified. One is type 1 and then type 2. And the type 2 is going to include things like tattoo parlors and things that generally, in terms of rent, tend to occupy lower rent type of spaces, which tends to bring down all the other retail around them. So we wanted to have that upcycle in your historic downtown and allow all those other uses because people want them, but have them in the motor vehicle-oriented commercial business district. So there's a little bit of difference in terms of protecting high-value uses in your historic downtown. But those are really the key differences between those two zones. And oh, one more. We want to encourage residential over retail in your historic downtown if somebody wants to do that. So we have more of a mixed-use program in that district as well.
Not residential instead of retail, but residential on
over the store,
on top of.
Right. So if somebody wants to live over the store in a 2- or 3-story building, we want people to do that because those people, you know, they walk downstairs and they spend money.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments, Council?
Todd, did you do your search?
Yeah, the landscape warranty is 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, and the other issue is if you have a landscape plan approved for your development, then you are obligated to maintain your landscape plan. But we have a warranty of 2 years is required on those landscape materials that go in.
Okay, 2 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Eric?
Are you guys done looking at the map? We'll turn the
Yes.
lights back on? Okay. So one of the other issues that I wanted to just quickly highlight for you is this question of changing the culture a little bit on both, as Todd mentioned, the greater emphasis on administrative approvals within guidelines that are set by council through this ordinance, and then also the practice and really changing your culture of deferring to the Planning Commission and letting them do their job and then typically ratifying what they do. So up on my screen here is section 21-8-105, which splits out the decision-making authority that goes directly to council. Those are subsection B 1 through 8. Those are things that council has authority over. And then subsection C are things that council ratifies that the Planning Commission does. And that's ratification of conditional use permits, preliminary plats, and final development plans. And then new language that you see in red, that ratification is by the consent agenda, but in extraordinary circumstances, a Planning Commission decision may be removed from the consent agenda and heard by council pursuant to a different section of the code, which is, I'm going to flip over to it, which is this section of the code, 21-8-512. And in particular, note the language highlighted in red, which is a change specific to UDC questions, a change from what you typically do to pull items from the consent agenda. This requires that when you're dealing with these ratifications that are on the consent agenda, you can only pull those from the consent agenda by a majority vote of council. So as you know, typically, any councilor can pull any item from the consent agenda just by saying, I want to pull that and discuss it under a regular discussion. For these ratifications, due to this culture shift and the emphasis on correct roles for the various entities and the streamlining that this code provides, that really is an extraordinary circumstance that the majority of the council would have to agree should be subject to council discussion. And just as an example, to bring your attention back to the real world, some of you on council will remember the recent conditional use approval that was done for Caton's. And that was a matter that staff had a recommendation. Pat remembers this better than I do, I'm sure. I think staff had a recommendation. Planning Commission did not go with that recommendation. It came to council and it was fully discussed at council, and again, staff made its recommendation again to council, and council went with the Planning Commission recommendation. Under this code, that discussion would be discouraged. You would just rely on what the Planning Commission had done unless a majority of council wanted to discuss it further. Pat had a similar example of the children's garden consideration about a year ago, where council specifically overturned staff's recommendation, which was, I think, well, I can't remember which way it went, but anyway, council overturned Planning Commission's recommendation. And again, council has a past culture of wading into these kinds of decisions. What the new code would do would be to discourage that, and council only wades in when a majority of council believes that there's an issue that really does need council oversight.
And that would be pulled from the consent calendar?
By a majority vote.
By a majority vote, okay.
So unless you had any further discussion on that, I just wanted to highlight that for you. And then let's talk a little bit about the mural issue. My suspicion is that this may be something that you want to leave as is in the current code and then address through amendment as we have a chance to think about it more, but maybe you're ready to talk about it tonight. So the way the current code is structured, the table that deals with murals requires that, or limits murals, or limits surface applied signs to no more than 5% of a wall area in a residential zone and 10% of a wall area in a business zone. So when you think about looking at a typical mural is usually a much larger percentage of a wall than that. And we wanted to just present to you some examples of murals that we actually have in town that staff feels we like as a town. And then at the end, I'll show you, as Todd was mentioning, there are First Amendment issues. You can't control the content of a mural. And so while we have murals that we like, and while we don't have any that I'm aware of that we don't like, we can't guarantee that we won't get murals that we don't like. So here's the first mural that, and these are a handful that we wanted to just use by way of example and illustration. This is on a garage owned by one of the persons in the audience here. Don Thompson sitting there. This is his garage right by Zapata Park. This obviously is just across the street from City Hall on the Schwinn Cyclery Shop. Heather took these pictures, and so she'll remember where this one is, but I don't know where these are. We've got some really nice murals in Alamosa. Here's something right on Main Street, I'm sure you're familiar with, that might fit within that 10% business district limit. So those are, and I think I trust our community. You guys would have a better feel. You're the politicians. We've got some nice murals out there that I think add greatly to the character of our town that would likely not be allowed in the under the way that the development code is currently written.
Eric, if I might interrupt. Yeah. I forgot this, but we had this discussion and we actually said in an edit, which is now in front of council, and we've been misrepresenting this inadvertently, 10% or 5% of the front wall and then 100% of the side wall. So we had made that, for presentation purposes, we had put that edit in that would allow all of these sidewall murals to occur, but also any other message that somebody wanted to put. It could be the name of their business, it could be a political message, it could be religious, it could be whatever. I mean, we don't regulate content anymore after Reed versus Gilbert. So that can be in or out, but right now it's in to allow unfettered use of a sidewall for whatever kind of paint you want to put on it.
Right. So and a sidewall would be a wall that faces an alley rather than a street. So a front wall is the wall facing a street, side wall facing an alley. Unless am I misrepresenting that, Todd? I don't recall. If you've got a wall facing a street, but it's not your entry wall, is that a side wall?
It is. Yeah. Okay. So a side street, vacant property, or an alley that comes up the side of the building. And we see, and you have a lot of these examples in town. In Denver, there's a lot of buildings where, there's either a building close by or an alley or whatever, and they're painting the side walls. And there's some beautiful work being done. There's some cruddy work being done too, but, mainly if somebody wants to invest in their building, they're going to make something pretty.
Here you go. Here's a street view Google Earth then of what I imagine would be a sidewall right here on San Juan. The main entry of the Wall Smith Bateman building faces Main Street, and then the San Juan face is not the entryway, and would be ripe for a mural under the way we currently have it structured. Correct?
Yes, that would be a side wall, and you would be able to paint it 100%. Obviously not over the windows, but.
And as Todd mentioned, here's the next example. You can't control the content, and so you can get political kind of murals. Peace and drugs, you Nixon. I can't read it all, but this is not in Alamosa. This is an example of other kinds of murals that you can get. And you can entertain yourself and Google socially unacceptable murals, and I'm sure you will be amazed by what some people think is appropriate to splash all over a wall.
Now, this one may be a violation of federal law, but the constitutionality of that federal law is now in question.
So the way that the mural provision is currently written would allow a mural like this or like this on a side street, but not on a front street, so not where the main entrance to the building is. You could also structure it so that they're allowed on north-south streets, but not on Main Street or 6th Street. You can allow certain sizes or limit the sizes on street faces and not limit them on alley faces. There are any number of things you can do to try to control the location of murals, but you cannot control the content.
And this is probably something we've spent a lot of time discussing, and it's something where we've recently, over the last couple of years, really started getting excited about the public art and what the opportunities are there, and the murals and those types of things. So from staff, it's very challenging because it's a way that we see as being able to beautify the community and to really just add a touch of what Alamosa is and hopefully make us a little more distinctive than some of the other communities that you go to. At the same time, we needed to make sure council understood what the risk was. And we don't want necessarily knee-jerk reactions, but we don't want to go into this with our eyes shut either. And part of that is, you know, we can look at some of those murals, and we didn't do some of the more crazy ones for tonight's presentation purposefully, but we also didn't want to create this overly emotional reaction as well, because the other caution that staff has is we've not had regulations, and thus to this point we haven't had to worry about it. But realistically, there are communities that are banning murals because they cannot control that, and so you're seeing both ends of the spectrum. And so it's something that we need to think through, or you as council need to think through, in regards to the risk and what you feel is appropriate risk. And what you see as a potential beautification for the community.
So a lot of cities that do mural programs that have substantial, numbers of murals that are significant in public art have some sort of funded public art program that they help that property owner with that. And you can't censor what's in a mural if you're just an approval body. But if you're paying for it, you can say, I'm not paying for that. So if the city is in some way, contributing to that process, then the city can, in effect, choose the content.
I have a question. Is graffiti a mural?
No, and the reason why is graffiti is unsolicited vandalism, right? If there's graffiti tags on a wall that somebody that wasn't the owner put there, then it's not a mural. But if the owner puts something up that looks like graffiti, that is the owner's constitutional right to the extent of the sign code allows.
So it's determined by the owner, okay.
Right, so graffiti is vandalism. Something that looks like graffiti that's commissioned by the owner is art.
Okay.
Which is, by definition, a sign under your code if it's on the wall.
Any other comments, or Eric?
So I could point out to you some of the other issues that we wanted to bring to your attention. Just to recap, the murals was one of the main issues. Addressing species diversification, we just wanted to bring to your attention that we adopted the recommendations of Marilyn Lozier rather than the tree board with respect to those. And we've addressed water to the extent that we develop, as Todd was talking about, a checklist in the Uniform Development Code rather than just having that buried in our annexation handbook, which is where it's been. We've discussed the balance of assignment of roles with a greater assignment of decision-making authority to the administrative staff throughout the code. And we've discussed the zoning map and the types of code there, and the 10 versus 16 parking space issue. I didn't hear a complete consensus, but it sounds like you may want to stay with the 16 as it currently is in the code, with the idea of revisiting that in the near future after you've had a chance to further do investigation and think about it. We didn't talk about whether you want to address murals at all or leave it in the code as is, which would allow any kind of mural on a side face, but limit to 10% on a front face.
Okay, Councilman Veal.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple thoughts. First of all, thank you, sir, for working on this, and staff. And just a couple thoughts from the discussion in the hearing. I agree with Mr. Adam that I think we shouldn't allow waivers for new businesses to get away from tree requirements. If we go with some of these recommendations about streamlining the process through planning and zoning, or our staff, we're already being business friendly. So I think in return they shouldn't be able to get away from those tree requirements. It beautifies our city, and that's a good thing. As far as the murals are concerned, I think that in a sense, our community is self-regulating itself. And up until now, we haven't had any of those kinds of murals yet. And I think our community would take care of that if that was going to try to happen. So I would personally like to see it, just leave it alone as is. I do like the fact that staff could have the potential and the ability to get deals done and move the process along. I don't think we need to be involved in all that stuff all the time. That's not our job. It gives more power to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's who we appoint and we interview. So in a sense, they are kind of acting upon our vision. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil.
You know, before we move on from that, I'm sure that Todd can lay his hands on this much more quickly than I can, but the ability to obtain a waiver is not unfettered. I mean, the circumstances under which you can obtain a waiver are related to hardship, and you've got to demonstrate why it is that you cannot meet the default requirements. So it's not just, I don't want to do it, I want a waiver.
Right. I did search that text because I read your mind. There's an app for that. It's on the name. It says the administrator may waive or decrease, not necessarily waive in all cases, planting requirements if the total number of trees that are required exceeds the number that can be reasonably planted on the subject property without materially increasing fire risk, compromising the health of the trees, or diminishing the use of the property. So it gives some significant level of discretion about whether to do that, and there would be some probably cultural aspect to that. That could be tightened down. We'd like to, when we're introducing something, provide some level of flexibility to see how it goes, because you may find out, you know, maybe we required too much. I don't think we required too much here, but it can happen. And on a particular site, the way it's developed, as it redevelops, you might have that problem. For example, there are likely a number of constrained sites in town that became constrained due to a road widening project or something like that, or they were platted for one use and then they became another use. And there's a limited amount of land. So when you park it and you have the existing building and you do this or that to make the use work, there might not be room anymore for the tree. So you can do an off-site mitigation requirement. You could build something like that in. But then you got to make sure that you've got a place to plant that tree, and then you got to make sure that you've got, you know, water on that tree to establish it and everything else. So I don't know whether you want to force the planting or have a fee in lieu or some kind of program for that. But that would be a policy decision to make. We just think as you're starting to implement this new stuff, you ought to have some sort of administrative flexibility. But I appreciate the point. I also appreciate the point about tree replacement. And like I said, I wrote the Durango Code, and if you look at those landscaping requirements, they're pretty serious. And if you wanted to have a tree replacement requirement, we have off-the-shelf language that we could send to you that you could put in an amendment at some point to have that. We also have language that we can use for protection of significant trees, which would be trees that are over a certain, the horticultural measurement is diameter of breast height, which is 4.5 feet off the ground. They look at the diameter of the tree. You know, you can protect trees of certain size or certain species or whatever. I mean, we do that. We didn't do it here because we're trying to strike that balance of having no regulations at all and then moving into that regulatory space without a tremendous amount of shock. But again, we do that. We write that stuff if you need it. And again, we'd be more than happy to answer that call in 6 months or 8 months when you've had some experience with this code as well.
Thank you, Todd. Council, any other questions? Councilman Vigil?
And I also would like to add about the landscaping requirement for the 16 parking space deal. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Carson. I think we should make the decision right now and keep it as is, 16 spaces.
Heather?
It's also something that if you approve it tonight and you keep it in at 16 and some of you go out and look around and want to have continued discussion on it, we can always have that as well.
Okay, Eric, what is your recommendation right now?
Well, funny you should ask. Give me a moment and I will tell you. So my recommendation is to approve ordinance, I had to scroll to it to remember myself of the number, approve ordinance number 33, 2017. And just mechanically, the ordinance number 33, 2017 is not the 250-page Unified Development Code, but is rather the ordinance that adopts that Unified Development Code. So ordinance 33 will adopt it. It will become codified into our Code of Ordinances as maintained on the ordinance website. And unless one of the members of council wants to make a motion to to modify the Unified Development Code in any particular respect after the discussions that we have had tonight, my recommendation would be that we have a motion to approve ordinance number 33, 2017, adopting the Unified Development Code as presented tonight.
Okay, and Heather?
And then the only thing I would add is once you're done with that official business, if there's some direction you want to provide staff on some of these options that have been some of this changes in language, and if we want to make it tougher and some of those types of things that Todd's reviewed, you can direct staff to collect that information and we can have a work session sometime in the future to talk about that as well.
So we can adopt it today and then revisit the items that council was talking about in the future? Okay, thank you. Council, any comments? David, go ahead.
Well, I would just like to bring up the 10 spaces. Do you think it'd be too onerous to have the 10 spaces rather than 16 for a small business?
Okay, Councilman Carson.
I think that's a pretty big burden initially, and I think keeping it at 16 is the right thing to do at this moment. Like I said, I'd have to go and really look at a parking lot, especially a parking lot of 10 spaces, and see what kind of businesses have those types of parking lots, and see if it's realistic, and that was my point with that. But I suggest that we do keep it at 16 for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Carson. Councilman Vigil?
And like Heather and Eric have both said, we can always come back and revisit this stuff. So I'm going to move that we adopt ordinance number 33-2017, an ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 21 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Alamosa, adopting a new Alamosa Unified Development Code in place of the existing zoning code.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, if not, council, please vote. Start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Todd and Eric and Heather. Thank you for explaining all of that to us. Okay. The next item on the agenda comes from the City Clerk. Holly?
Okay, so this item is discussion and direction on the at-large vacancy process. As you know, the at-large seat became vacant upon Ty Coleman being sworn into the mayor's position. So the charter directs that council make appointment to fill any vacancies that occur. However, it does not specify how the recruitment or appointment process is to happen. So council directed staff to notify the public of this opportunity and requested letters of interest to be submitted with a deadline at December 1st. Those letters of interest are attached to the agenda if you want to look at those. And we had 13 people who formally requested to be considered for that vacancy. Those people were Shirley Adcock, Daryl Cooper, Leland Romero, Lori Smith, Christina Daniel, Michael Stefano, Rob Oringdolf, Joseph Lucero, Martine Diaz, Heather Hickson, John Adams, Pete McGee, and Josh Weehee. So in previous years, council has agreed to hold interviews with those interested and then to determine to appoint at a next regular meeting after interviews were held. Unless otherwise directed, staff is not planning to schedule the selection of Mayor Pro Tem until after this vacancy has been filled. So we have a few dates. If council wants to hold interviews, we've got the following options available. We can add interviews to the currently scheduled work session on December 13th, which is a work session scheduled for liquor license authority training. We anticipate that training to take approximately 1.5 hours. You can schedule interviews prior to and after your December 20th City Council meeting. You can schedule them prior to or after the January 3rd City Council meeting. You can also conduct interviews on Wednesday, January 10th, or you can choose to hold interviews on any night other than a Wednesday. And then Eric's going to talk to you about the voting process that we're going to suggest.
I will do that, but why don't we do that after you take up how you want to conduct this process? So do you want to conduct interviews? Do you want to conduct them on council nights or off Wednesdays or on an all-day Saturday? Or, you know, how and when do you want to do that?
Councilor Vigil would like to say something.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Like I said a couple weeks ago, I would like to get this position filled for that first meeting in January. Our first meeting in January is on the 3rd. I think it's important that we do have an interview process for everybody. And I would also suggest that if we try our best, and I know there's 13 people to accommodate plus our schedules, if we can get every interview done on the same day. So that would maybe require a Saturday. If I remember last time we did this, when we chose Mr. Coleman, it was on a Saturday. We took all morning, I believe. Yet we didn't have that many people, but I know that some people on this council and previous council voiced some opinions about when we have interviews for filling vacancies on different boards, how if we have an interview one night and we don't have interviews for the next positions 2 or 3 weeks later, we forget about what was said or what was going on with other candidates. Those are just some thoughts I had.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil. Councilor Hensley.
So I somewhat agree with what you're saying. I think even if we were to do half-hour interviews, and I'm not sure how we set these interviews up time-wise and stuff, but for 13 interviews, we're looking at 6 hours, 7 hours. And so my thought is, I agree, we should not spread it out by 2 weeks. I know I've been on a lot of search committees, and so having it 1, 2, or 3 days in a row, personally, I think would work. I'm not saying I'm totally against doing a Saturday, but what I also wouldn't want to have happen is by that 5th and 6th hour, people are kind of getting a little, on our end, just that little worn out and maybe not being as fair. So, and then again, I don't know how we decide that, and so that would be one of my questions, is how we decide how long those interviews should be.
Well, we decide that, and I would suggest 10-minute interviews, tops.
10 minutes might not be enough time, Councilor Vigil, to really ask all the questions that we may have, but I think somewhere in the area, maybe 15 to 20 minutes might give us enough time. So we want to make sure that we're giving these candidates ample opportunity to express their interest and why they would make a good fit for our city. So I think we're going to have to look at that time frame. I think, Heather, you had run a scenario as well as far as how much time should probably be allowed in an interview.
And we were just running it to get it filled, in no way as a recommendation, but we ran it on as, I think, 15 minutes, and it's like 3 hours and 15 minutes is what that comes to. And so it's pretty meaty if you can get it down to even the 15 minutes type thing.
So about 15 minutes, and maybe allow 5 minutes in between the candidates. And how much time did that come out to be?
Then you're closer much to the 4-hour time frame.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things you will also want to consider when you're considering the mechanics of this is that these are not executive session personnel kind of interviews. These are open meetings that you're doing this in. And so when you have 13 people who you're interviewing, you got to figure out, are you going to ask them to voluntarily step out, or are you going to just allow them to hear what everybody else has to say? If you do that, how are you going to order who comes when? So you got to think about those fairness considerations.
Okay, Councilor Broyles.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't do it on the 13th. I have a personal problem. I'm going to be out of town the 14th and 15th.
What day is that on? What day of the week?
13th is next Wednesday.
Okay.
And so clearly, that's one of the options we gave. We want to make sure if you do them all at one night, we do anticipate that the liquor license training will take about an hour and a half. So you're looking at about 5.5 to 6 hours if you choose that option. And do it all at one time.
Could we move the liquor licensing training because to accommodate the new counselor that we're going to pick up?
We talked about that, but we have on your next agenda some items that are related to that we feel the training is going to be very helpful.
Councilor Carson?
My thoughts would be to dedicate a evening to it if that's what we're going to do, and then that way we're focused on that process. Mixing it in with the training, I think, will just pretty much leave us all numb by the time the training's over. So, I mean, you know, the 20th of December is a good day. You know, it puts us out. Well, that's what I'm saying. If we dedicate it, if we were going to dedicate an evening to it, you know, it would pretty much be the majority of the business that evening. So, I mean, that's kind of a killer. I'd suggest we do it alone, though. We dedicate an evening or a day to that process.
How about Tuesday the 19th?
In the evening? Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, so I agree. I think the idea of doing, and I think with the amount of time we need, it needs to be just that. And so I don't think, for me personally, even tying city council to it, because if anything, city council usually will take longer than the hour and a half for.
And right now, we don't have Councilor Griego here to weigh in on this. How important will it be for council to have all council members here if all 5 of us can agree on a date today? How important is it for us to have all 6 councilors here?
My impression is that you guys are picking a fellow teammate for the next 2 years, and so I think everyone has some opinions and feels that this is probably a big decision and would want to be involved. I believe Councilor Griego is back in town tomorrow or here shortly to where we could check scheduling with him. So if we wanted to pick a preferred and maybe a backup or something like that, we can do that as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Councilor Rawls?
How about the 19th, Tuesday the 19th? The problem, you know, the other problem is we're getting into Christmas season after that. That's going to become more and more difficult.
Councilor Carson?
I'm fine with the 19th as a primary, and then we can set up a backup if that's, you know, because I think Charlie's input is extremely important. She's right.
Councilor Vigil?
Would it be too soon to do something next week? Next Tuesday or Thursday?
So Thursday doesn't work for me. I have marketing board. I can do it if we have to. I give 4 finals next Tuesday. So I'm going to be giving finals from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. I could do it, but my preference would be the following week. But if we had to, and that was what was decided, I could do it.
So is it something that the 19th, if I connect with Councilor Griego, the 19th is the preferred, and the plan B would be the 12th if he absolutely cannot make the 19th? Is that what I'm hearing from council?
So, yes, I think that's what the consensus is. How does everyone feel about that?
I agree.
You agree? Are you in agreement? That works? Start at 5, or what time you all think would work for you who work? I think 5:30 would probably work a little bit better. And please, if we can get there a little earlier, just to get prepared, yes.
So we'll do 5:30, and what I would recommend is similar to from a municipal judge perspective, if there are some questions or some concepts that you think would be critical to try to capture, if you could send that to myself or Holly, we can compile that and try to get it. Did you decide, did you want to try to keep it to 15 minutes or 20 minutes? Is that what the goal is?
I would say no longer than 20 minutes should be enough time. When we were doing the interviews with the different judges, we were allowed a lot more time because we had some other issues to address. To where on council, I think we could probably ask all of those questions with that allowed amount of time. How do you all feel about that? Okay.
So we will kind of start blocking out some stuff from a 15-minute time perspective, and we'll keep that in mind as we receive the questions and send the draft out to council in advance. In regards to what the city attorney brought up, would you like for us to request that the others don't show up for the other interviews, and it will just be they honor the request, but that there's no way to enforce that?
Is there a way we could possibly have the interviews in the chambers right there in the conference room and have them?
You can have it in there, but it's still public.
Oh, it's public.
It's not the location. It's
Okay.
that it's a public meeting.
That makes sense. Thank
Yeah.
you for bringing that up.
My thought on that, if it's okay,
ahead. Sure.
is
Councilman.
if this is public meeting and it's a request to have people not being here, but obviously they could be, I mean, I'm not saying it would happen, but things could be recorded, I mean, all that. Maybe if it wasn't that they were going to go out, is the idea of having all the names in a hat type situation and it's luck of the draw? If we had to go with that route.
We need to try to figure it out a little bit. You just calm down over here. We can, that is one of the options we can do, but I think for the 13 individuals, I don't know if it's, not that we have to make it extremely convenient for them as well, but from a consideration, it's sometimes easier to know if you're going to be at this slot. You can show up for that slot, wait out there, and then come in, you know, if they want to honor that request. It's sometimes easier to show up for your slot than everyone showing up at the beginning and sitting through as we draw names.
So I think then maybe a combination then of doing the drawing of names, so it's like a draw, so it's not necessarily alphabetical order or something, and so, but we do it ahead of time.
Okay.
And if somebody's sitting through it, or, you know, it just allows it that way it's sort of a, I don't, more of a luck situation of wherever it is, if that even makes a difference, but.
Okay.
That's just my idea, I don't know.
Did we address what you wanted to discuss?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Councilor Broyles?
Yeah, I think it's just convenient for both us and the candidate to have an assigned time and let staff assign that time to talk to the candidates and work it out.
Okay. Councilman Vigil?
Yeah, I think we should just assign them a time. You get there for your interview, and then you do your interview.
Okay. Councilman Carson?
Why not alphabetically?
Time-wise?
Yeah, I mean, just for slot. I mean, is there an issue with that? I mean,
Because I guess and so I'm just thinking of all situations, if there's an advantage to somebody listening to somebody else's, I guess I look at it's more luck of the draw versus you happen to have yours that starts with an A, so you're always the first person, and I just don't know, I'm just saying but it's not a big deal to me, it doesn't matter.
well, me being, you know, this is my first time with a process like this, and being that it's public comment, a public meeting, and you have the ability to be there if you want to or not, I'm not necessarily opposed to them staying in the room either. Right. I mean, the thing is this is a very scrutinized position anyway, and I don't see why any of us would be, you know, I guess embarrassed or opposed to speaking our mind about a candidate in front of the entire council, because I mean, in the long run, that's how it ends up being anyway.
I agree.
You know,
So, you know, the part of it is, you know, if someone gets to sit through 5 people answering the same questions, they have time to craft a better response because they weren't first. They got to be at the end. But honestly, you know, it's a simple request. I think most of them will probably honor it because I think they'll know that if they don't, you'll probably take that into consideration realistically. So, you know, it is a public meeting. You can request it. And then clearly once they've done that, they can sit in and listen in, and there's no, you know, drawback to that type of thing of listening to those that come after you is clearly doesn't create any issues. But it's just something from a consideration perspective.
Go ahead, Councilor Carson.
so would we just have them wait in one of the conference room next door, and then as they're interviewed, they can sit in public and watch the rest of the interviews? Is that?
Yeah, so what we did last time is we actually can partition this room and hold it on that side. So it's a little bit more of a more comfortable, casual environment. And then we just had some tables set out, council set around it. We had each candidate would come in, sit there. There is some questions, and then we would just have them come in when it was their turn. And some of them chose to stay when they were done, and some of them chose to leave.
What are your thoughts, Council?
I'm
Councilor
totally good
Hanson?
with that. I do have a question, though, since we're talking about the whole, how it goes. So then after that's done, do we then do our, and I know you're getting to the next part, but then do we, whichever way we choose, then we make our decision then? Or do we wait till the next city council?
Eric, are they okay doing the voting and tallying, and then that way we can kind of know, and then they're officially sworn in at the meeting, or do they have to wait to do their voting and tallying at the actual work business meeting?
No, you certainly don't have to wait. You can do it however you want to do it, whatever way you want to do it. If you want to do the interviews and then the official decision on who you're going to appoint all in the same meeting, we would just notice that as a regular meeting, not as a work session or anything, and agendize both interviews and then decision.
I kind of like that idea more in the sense, sort of back to what Councilman Vigil says, is sometimes when a couple of weeks goes by, things start getting a little bit gray.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that has a different opinion, or would you like to kind of get it taken care of all in one night as described?
I think for all of us, it's probably best that we try to get it all done in one night while our memories are still fresh, and we can make some valid decision right there based on their interviews. I think that's going to be crucial. And I'd just like to add a comment right now, too. I would like to thank all of the people who are candidates and who sent in your letters of interest. Having 13, that's more than the majority of us ever thought we would have to encounter, but this is a good problem to have in the city of Alamosa because it shows that we have some truly dedicated people who want to make a positive difference in our community. I would just like to encourage you, we're going to pick one person, and that's probably going to leave 12 people out. So the other 12 people, I just want you to know that we have other boards that you could really participate and make a difference in our community too as well.
At this point, I'm not going to steal your thunder, Eric, because I know he's very excited to talk about a mathematical theorem as part of a council meeting. But staff does have a bit of a different recommendation for the voting than how we've done it in the past. And I'll see how Eric does explaining it and if I need to jump in at all.
You would not believe how excited my inner nerd was when I looked at 13 candidates and I thought, well, I understand the suggestion that Councilor Vigil made, and in fact, that's the method that you used for selecting the municipal judge. But gee, I think there's problems when you try to apply that to 13 people. And I have a mathematician friend at Adams State, and I called him up and I said, hey, is there a problem that arises when you're trying to devise a voting mechanism and you have a multiple number of candidates? And he answered immediately and said, oh yes, there's Arrow's impossibility theorem, which says you cannot devise a voting system for 3 or more candidates that will accurately reflect the desires of the voters. You can't do it. Mathematical proof in the 1950s by Kenneth Arrow. You can try to come close, but the assumption, and I put this in the Novus issue, you make assumptions about what constitutes a reasonable voting method. And he managed to prove, and I haven't looked up his proof, I am not a mathematician, I can't try to follow it, but I trust them. They know what they're doing generally. You cannot come up with a method that will guarantee that your result reflects the will of the voters. I.e., in this situation, you cannot guarantee that the result will reflect the true desires of the 6 of you who are trying to make this decision. And nothing we can do is going to ensure that your desires are reflected. But I think we can try to come closer. And so staff's suggestion is that we modify Councilor Vigil's proposal by making it potentially a 2-stage proposal or a 1-stage, depending on how the voting turns out. But rather than rank each candidate 1 through 13, you would each list your 4 top candidates, 1 through 4, and we would assign point values to them such that your highest candidate got the most points, and then we tally those up across all 13 candidates, and the one with the highest number of points is the one who's selected. And just to test that out, Heather and I did a few random vote assignments, and it came out with ties. And so if you come out with a tie, then you would move into a second stage, and the tie would presumably be 4 or fewer candidates, and we don't have to worry quite so much about not reflecting what the true inclinations of the voters are, and I think you could just use a straight ranking of all 4 of those then at that point. So that's the suggestion on how you handle that voting. The other thing that allows to happen, as mentioned in the council communication, is that Councilor Carson would have a conflict of interest with respect to the vote because his fiancée, Ms. Hickson, is one of the candidates. So if she is in the running, he's got a conflict. If she's not, then he doesn't. So if there is a second stage, then he would be able to vote in that second stage because the conflict would have gone away.
Yeah, Councilor Hensley.
So just the one last part, and mine's not as sophisticated as a mathematical theorem, but when I look at the ranking system and you get to these numbers, there can also be some political maneuverability, and you would hope that that's not necessarily what we get into, but for example, if Councilor or Mayor Coleman decided he didn't want Liz's number 1 to get it, all he has to do is put a 12, and that it doesn't matter if all of you rank that person with a 1, if someone gets a 12 or a 13, they're automatically out of it. And so we wanted to eliminate some of the sandbagging potential and just have it be as pure of a type of process as possible, that you're really listing your top 4 and not necessarily getting into potential gaming and those types of things as well.
Thank you, Heather. Councilor Hensley?
I was just going to say, and I think it's assumed, is that obviously if Heather Hickson makes the final, then obviously you wouldn't vote in the second.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So I mean, that was assumed, but
Okay. Councilor Vigil?
So I do like that idea about your top 4, and then, and you have to tell me if I'm wrong. So then we top 4, and then we would say rank those over again?
Well, you may not need to rank those over again. So if you do your top 4, and we add up all the points that the various people got, and there is one person who has the most points, then you're done. But if there are more than one person with the same number of top points, then you need to do a runoff, essentially.
As council, you can also decide you just want to use this process as the first stage, and then that gives you your top number of candidates, and then you can just do your ranking system again if you wanted to.
That's a good point. Yeah, you could do that. You could say rank your top 4, and then we're going to take the top 4 and have a runoff. So you could guarantee yourself a 2-stage vote if you wanted. I don't know whether there's a mathematical theorem that will tell you whether that's a better way or not, or whether there's any advantage to be gained from that.
I just hope that as we go through the process, I really would like to hear what you all have to say about each candidate and where you see this going and what you would like and stuff like that. Not so just I don't want it just to be listen to an interview, rank them, top 4, and that's it. I want to listen to what you all have to say.
Good concern, Councilman Vigil. Would you prefer us do that right after we interview them?
I think similar to how we just did the attorney, or excuse me, the judge, that we had a little discussion, and then so my thoughts is we can discuss it, and then we put our rankings together, and then it can be calculated.
So we need to calculate that in the time of these interviews, because when we did that, we allowed for a little time after the interviews, between interviews, to have those little brief conversations.
I would say we could wait till after.
To after?
I think so. We write our notes and then we can all discuss.
Okay.
Personally, that's, with this many, I think we could just do it that way.
Here's something to bear in mind on that, and I see Councilor Carson is beeped in, so maybe he was going to bring this up, but if you have your discussion immediately after the interviews, when Ms. Hickson is still a candidate, Mr. Carson can't participate in the discussion either. If you, of anybody, that's right. If you wait until, if you do a vote and then you determine that all of a sudden his conflict has gone away, then he can participate in discussion. So you might want to consider having an initial vote or something, I don't know.
Councilor Carson?
I did consider that issue and looked at it carefully. I looked at our conflict of interest policies, and I do agree that I have a conflict in abstaining from the vote. I do not agree that I do have to be removed from the process as a whole. So that's my take on that. It was automatically something that we had decided when she decided to throw her hat in there, that of course I would abstain. Morally, ethically, that's the right thing to do. However, in looking at the conflict of interest policy, it doesn't technically apply. She is not my spouse. And so with that being said, I would abstain from a vote, but the process itself, as long as it was within reason, I would be able to participate.
Eric?
That is not the opinion of the city attorney. So the way these things work, nobody can tell a council, I can't tell a councilor that he can or cannot participate. Council can't tell a councilor that he can or cannot participate. But I can and will say that the opinion of the city attorney is quite clear that Mr. Carson has a conflict of interest, cannot vote, and both your conflict of interest policy and the state ethics code indicate that not only when you have a conflict, not only can you not vote, but you cannot participate in the discussion.
Councilor Vigil. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Hensley.
I was just going to say, I feel like this is a similar along the lines, and I'm going to use as an example. So when Mayor Coleman, and I forget the exact thing, but there was something that had to do, I think, with housing or something, and he actually excused himself while we discussed it. I feel like is that same idea of when there's that true conflict that's that direct.
Yes, Councilor Coleman, would actually leave the room. You don't actually need to do that. A more recent one is when we had the discussion with the contract for ATC and Councilor Daniel. She declared her conflict and then refrained from any of the discussions related to that contract. So it's similar to that.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this kind of puts us in a tough spot. I mean, if I'm listening to you, Eric, you're saying that this is your professional opinion, and I'm hearing what you're saying, Mr. Carson. If you're still involved in the process, I guess my question is: are you hearing what he said? Do you still intend to participate in the process?
Councilor Carson.
And if you do, my question then goes to you, Eric. That puts council in a tough spot.
So, Councilor, if I could jump in just real fast, because process can mean a lot. And so right now, when we've been talking about how do we want to do the interviews, how long do we want them to be, those kind of process discussions, Eric did not feel that there is a conflict of interest for the counselor to participate in those types of discussions. When it gets to the actual interview and there's discussions about the individual candidates, it's at that point in the process, I think that the conflict started to arise. And so because the process can be much bigger and the conflict doesn't necessarily encompass the whole entire area.
Right, and so the tough spot, you're right, it's a tough spot, and as I said, neither I nor council makes a decision that whether or not any individual council member has a conflict and can participate. However, council also, and that's the reason I stated here in open session what my opinion is on the conflict. Council, if Councilor Carson chooses to participate, you've heard what my opinion is on the conflict, and you can bear in mind any comments that he makes, knowing that I think he has a conflict in making those.
Councilor Carson, and then Councilor Hensley.
In going back to that, I felt that removing myself from any process that involved her was sufficient. The interview process and the selection process, and if it came down to a vote where she was a finalist, I would abstain and I would even leave the room. You know, that's where I stand as far as that goes.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Hensley?
So from what I've heard you say, and then also, Eric, from what you said, here's my thoughts, and so tell me if I've heard this right. So my thought is that we go through the interview process. Obviously, you listen to the interview process. Because Heather's part of that, so when we're in that discussion phase, again, I don't know if you necessarily have to leave, but that you would listen, but you probably couldn't add anything to that. We would do our initial vote, our 1, 2, 3, 4. When we get to that, if there's a winner, then that's the winner. If it goes to the second section and Heather is not part of it, then you could be part of that second round of discussion as we then are going to renumber, you know, like let's say it's a tie between two. And we may want to discuss those two and then rank them. That chances are, and if Heather's not part of it, then I think you could be part of that discussion. If Heather was part of that, then obviously you'd have to refrain again. Yes. And we could still have that discussion and do the 1, 2. I'm thinking I've heard that, if that seems good to you, and does that sound right to you, Eric? And to the rest of, obviously, council?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to suggest.
Okay.
That makes sense to me.
Councilor Broyles.
Well, yeah, I think we have to make sure that there's no appearance of partiality. It's just so that when the final decision's made, there's not somebody upset because they feel like there was a partial or a bias in the process. So as long as you feel, I think as long as you feel that it's transparent, it's not, people won't consider it biased, then I think that's a problem. I think that's what we need to look at.
Councilor Carson.
I agree with you.
Eric, any other comments on this, or what are your thoughts from what Liz just said?
Well, I'm not going to try. I was actually looking up our ethics, our conflict of interest policy. So I was only listening to Liz with half an ear. So if you want me to repeat what she said, I won't do it. I'll make her do it. But I was with my half ear. I think that process should be satisfy any conflict of interest issues and enable you to have a full discussion.
You have something else? Any other comment? Councilor Carson?
I want to go back to the actual interview process, a different issue than this one. My concern with the 15 minutes, and I know we addressed this earlier as far as doing all the comments afterward. So is that what we agreed on, that we would do the comments after the interviews? And okay, then that nulls my point then, right. Because I felt 15 minutes wasn't sufficient for us to discuss a candidate and to also discuss, you know, if everyone feels at that point there's a conflict of interest, then I should step out.
So I want to make sure, because what I heard is you don't talk after each interview, you're going to do the discussion. And is that what you just said, Councilman Carson? Okay, I just want to, thank you.
Well, not only that, but you're going to do all the interviews and then you're going to do an initial vote, right? And then you're going to discuss. Oh, you're going to discuss.
And Councilman Carson, you will not participate in that discussion, correct? So I think, yes, your half ear was good, but I listened with both, and I think we're good. So I think we're good.
So Mr. Carson is going to sit on these interviews completely silent for 3 hours?
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Carson?
As long as Heather's involved, I would have to.
We're not going to be doing a lot of talking ourselves.
Well,
okay.
It needs to be transparent to the people.
Right. Yeah, so we'll each ask a question. We probably won't even have enough for each of us to ask a question. We'll decide those questions. And so we're going to just be asking the questions, writing notes, going through each one. And then at the end, we'll discuss it and then do our vote.
Eric?
So if you're going to be, when you said you're going to decide the questions, when you did the judge interviews, you had a set of questions that you asked each candidate. If that's what you're going to do, you need to set aside some time to decide what those questions are going to be.
Well, I thought Heather's going to collect them and send them to us to pick beforehand.
Okay, but when we did the judge interviews, there was some question about how the large list got whittled down. So at some point, you need to, I think, all be together and decide what those
Well, I think
questions
people
are
need to
gonna
watch their emails and respond when Heather sends this so that it can be whittled down.
So if they
You're right, and I also think maybe we should come up with some questions right now or some general ideas of what we should be asking these people.
I'd rather send them in, or we can talk about it later. I don't have a question on the top of my head.
Yeah, I think we probably should think a little bit clearly so we can make sure that we're asking questions that we think are relevant to the situation, but I appreciate you wanting us to move forward with that, Councilor Vio. Okay. Any other comments on this matter? For me, I just want to make sure that whatever we do is transparent and above board. And if there are any ethical issues, I would hope that we address those in the process to where we're not going to do anything that's going to cause the public to not trust us and cause the applicants who are applying to feel that there's any flaws in the system. I think that's very important as we go through in this process so that everyone will feel like they had a fair shot and a fair opportunity.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure, go ahead.
So, Councilor Vito. I was thinking, I think there is something to be said, sorry, and I kind of spoke fast, is since we are going to have that liquor session next Wednesday, I think we could take 15 minutes or 20 minutes to pick out our questions then. We all come with them, and that way we could pick them out together, especially if it turns out that we do end up doing the interviews on the 19th. Does that sound? Because that way there is something with what you said, and I apologize for jumping in so fast with my opinion. Okay.
Great suggestion. Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Councilor Vio, thank you. All right, did someone write all of that down? Good. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the city manager legal. Heather?
So every year during council's mini retreat, you guys take a look at the mini committees and the appointments that you have. A lot of times, a council member will continue with that attendance with the committee, and sometimes they want to make room and let someone else get some experience with that committee. Right now, our mini retreat is tentatively scheduled for March, which means we're going to have some committees with the recent election that do not have council appointees. And so what staff's recommendation is that we maybe take a quick look at that list and try to maybe identify some people who are willing to volunteer in the meantime. We are missing Councilor Griego, and so, if we don't get all of them, I can also contact Councilor Griego. And again, this is just temporary until March. It's just to make sure if any of these committees have a meeting between now and then that we do have some representation. And so if I look here, I'll multitask here.
Can I add one change to the Airport Advisory Board?
Yes.
Only because the times have changed.
Okay, so I did not have a chance to follow up with Dustin to get those. If you want to give them to me now, or
I texted him and he told me.
Okay.
So it's the second Thursday of every other month at 9 a.m.
And do you know when the next one is?
They just had it in January.
Okay, so January will be
next. And this is not a voting member anymore.
Okay. And so I'll just start at the top and go through. We had Michael Stefano, who was the primary, with Liz Hensley as alternate. So are there thoughts on the second Thursday at 9 a.m. with the next one being in January?
I could fill that role for now.
Okay. And Hensley, would you like to remain alternate? Okay. And then clerk, can you help me take notes on this one? Okay. Tree board, we had as lead Christina Daniel and Charlie Griego as the alternate. Is that something you would prefer for me to see if Charlie's willing to maybe move up into the primary? Okay. The next one is not so much a decision you need to make. Let me keep, okay, it's more just from an informational perspective. The Recreation Advisory Board, per charter, is the mayor, so we'll make sure on some of these changes that are set by statute or charter that Mayor Coleman, that will make you aware of those dates and times. And then we'll find out if you're not able to make those, if it's something that you can have an appointee.
Okay, thank you.
The intergovernmental affairs, the legislative, that is, we meet as needed. And per our policy, we had that determined as the mayor and the mayor pro tem. So we have a mayor. I'm not sure if someone wants to volunteer. You're not going to be mayor pro tem, but if you want to volunteer, because legislative season will be in January, February.
Councilor Hensley, were you were first?
I'd be willing to unless somebody else really wanted to.
Okay. Councilor Brawls, did you have something to say? No, did you? Go ahead.
Well, you know, because of my background, I would have an interest to serve on the golf, you know, be the liaison with the golf board.
Okay, I'll get to that one here in a second.
You're going down with the...
Oh, that one's not open yet. We have... we're just going through the ones where the election has changed it. I'm sorry, I probably didn't explain that very well. These are just temporary ones that don't have a council liaison because of the election. Okay, so we have Councilor Hensley for the legislative. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Senior Citizens, Michael Stefano was the one. They meet the second Tuesdays every month at 10:30 at the Senior Center. I will say that I have had Jolene attending every meeting.
So on that one right there, we have Liz as an alternate. And does anyone want to step up to fill that position where Mr. Stefano had it? Would that fit someone's schedule?
I can probably do it.
Councilman Broyles, okay.
Councilman Broyles?
Yes, Councilman Broyles. Thank you.
The Alamosa Capital Leasing Corporation, I'm not sure we will have to have a meeting, but just in case, the bylaws have it as the mayor pro tem. Are you okay, Councilor Hensley, if we use you as the volunteer for that one as well, or is there someone else who's interested for the Alamosa Capital Leasing Corporation?
I'm okay with it.
The library board had Michael Stefano and Christina Daniel as the alternate. They meet on the fourth Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Here at City Hall. And this is actually a voting position, so it's somewhat important to make quorum. Okay, Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil.
The marketing board had Christina Daniel. We do have Charlie as the alternate, if that's one you want me to check, or if there's another one who's interested.
Councilor Broyles.
I could do that if you want me to.
Okay. Council of Governments, this meets every other month on the last Monday. The council member is a voting member, and that was held by Joseph Lucero. And I believe...
Carson?
I can fill that position.
Okay. And we don't have a time on that, so we'll make sure and get that information to you.
And I think they usually meet around 3 o'clock on that Monday.
Okay.
Because I go to the DRG meeting that follows that, and it starts at 5.
Okay.
The Alamosa Housing Authority, Joseph Lucero and Michael Stefano was the alternate.
That one, I cannot, because of where I work at the bank. We have our meetings during that time every Wednesday of the month. Every Wednesday in the month, we have our meetings, so I won't be able to make that one at all. So
I don't know, and I'm wondering if it's a conflict for me because I'm on the board of the Housing Coalition. So I just thought I'd throw that. I don't know if that would end up being a conflict, and I just don't know if it is or not. Do you have any?
So is that one you would want me to check to see if?
You mean a conflict time-wise or a conflict of interest conflict?
I was wondering if it was an interest conflict.
I don't know what the Housing Coalition does. The Housing Authority, I know what they do.
I mean, you know a little bit about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think it would be a conflict of interest because I remember when I was working with the Community Resources and Housing Development, I think you're probably more like an added benefit because you could bring some insight that would help, but I don't think the two cross paths at all. Because I did serve on this board at one time before I switched jobs.
Give me 1 sec to look at my schedule for next semester.
And they can really use your expertise. Close to the college.
I could do it. Okay. If Charlie really wants, whichever way, I could do it.
And I can check with Charlie. I know he has a history of serving on it. I think when it became a non-voting member, he wasn't as interested, but from a temporary perspective, maybe that doesn't matter as much.
And if it's not, so I'm honestly on that one very open, so whatever we decide.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, I guess through May or through March, I could do it.
Okay.
And then we can go from there.
Okay, so we'll put you down, and then in March, you guys can readdress that. The investment committee, this meets as needed. There is a chance, because we're starting to work on a policy for the investment committee, and we probably need to meet to finalize that, to do an update of where we've moved some of the funds. And so Christina was someone who was on that.
I can do that.
Okay. Councilman Broyles. And then on the animal shelter, this is, I don't think they have set meetings. It's something that the county's leading, but the discussion from a historical perspective is the long-term needs, facility needs for the animal shelter, and will there need to be a need to build it? What does that look like? Who should be around the table? Those types of things. So Christina and Michael were the two council representatives.
I'll fill one of those seats.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Carson?
Yes.
Is there another volunteer, or do we want to check with Charlie?
Charlie.
Okay. The last request I have, and since it's not one of those standing meetings, is council has directed staff to work with La Puente on setting up a joint meeting and those types of things. One of the items, as we've had some preliminary discussions with them, is it might be beneficial for them to have 1 or 2 board members and for us to maybe have 1 or 2 council members to talk about what does that agenda look like, what are some of the major issues, is there research that needs to happen, that type of thing. So we're still going to have the bigger meeting, but we thought it might be worthwhile to have 1 or 2 council members be involved in the discussions of what does that agenda look like, what are the questions you're interested in, that type of thing. So for the La Puente, do I have any volunteers for that?
I would volunteer.
So I've got Councilor Carson and Councilor Vigil.
Thank you.
And I believe that's all I have for that agenda item.
Thank you, Heather. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the renewal of the contract with Valley Humane League. Heather?
Okay, thank you. The city currently has a contract with the Valley Humane League. We've had this contract since about 2013. We pay approximately $18,000 a year for the services that the Valley Humane League provides. And that services is essentially for our officers when we pick up stray dogs. That's where we're able to take them. The county also utilizes the Valley Humane League, and their officers can take the stray dogs there, as well as the community. So if a community member picks up a dog, they are able to take there. And then, of course, they really work on adopting the animals out. They even have established relationships to the Denver area for ones that they're not getting adopted out, to try to keep it as a no-kill situation. Over the last 9 months, the city has taken approximately 105 stray dogs, and the community has taken approximately 76 stray dogs. From a historical perspective, it was approximately 2013 when this organization was thinking about no longer operating. And at that time, the police chief and I looked at who else could provide this service, and the nearest area was Monte Vista, and they have a very well-run operation there, and we would have felt very comfortable with that, but we would have needed to invest capital funds in order for them to have the space to take the number of animals that we have been bringing to the local shelter. Additionally, you're looking at a longer drive time for officers and those types of things. I offer this information because, you know, we get a request from them for a $500 monthly increase, and I wanted to make sure to provide a little bit of background on the value that staff places on the service that we're able to receive from them. As they indicated in the public comment section, their executive director currently does not get paid. This person is the one who's tasked with grant writing. She's oftentimes forming the relationships for loaning or sending the dogs to other locations so it can be a no-kill, and getting the volunteers and the fundraising and all of that type of stuff. The board's reached a conclusion that for sustainability, they don't think that's a very appropriate situation, and that's why they are requesting the $500 increase. It would bring our annual cost from $18,000 to $24,000, and staff does feel this is reasonable. Clearly, council has already adopted the annual budget, which includes the $18,000. So if you would like, if you do approve this contract with the $500 increase, we would just do a budget amendment in 2018.
Thank you, Heather. Council, any comments? Councilor Rehill.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a great deal for our city. I see the need for the $500 increase. So I would be in favor of this when we get to that point.
Thank you. Councilor Broyles.
I don't have a problem with the $500 increase.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hensley, you're in. Okay.
So I'll move that we approve the new contract with the Valley Humane League that includes a $500 monthly increase for compensation for the executive director, which is currently unpaid.
We have a motion.
I second that motion.
We have a second. Okay, any further discussion? Okay. Start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Okay, the next item is management agreement with the Alamosa Golf Club for the management and operations of the golf course on behalf of the City of Alamosa. Heather?
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I would say probably for the last 2 years, we have had a lot of discussions with the golf board in regards to the existing management agreement that's in place. There's language in the management agreement that is no longer applicable or it's outdated. There's some language that throughout the years, because of its vagueness, has caused some contention sometimes between the city and the golf board. And then there's just some language that we felt was missing. So as we've gone through these 2 years, we've been looking at the management agreement. We've also had discussions on, is it a point where the city should assume operations of the golf course and those types of discussions. The golf course has also seen a lot of changes in regards to the board members, the restaurants, the operations and those types of things. And so they've really had a lot of work on their plate for the last couple of years as well. And so what this represents is the culmination of a lot of work sessions, a lot of committee meetings, a lot of meetings by the council and by the golf board, and it's a contract for 3 more years. The previous contract was for 10, and the golf board recommended a smaller time frame. And the major changes is we provided a better description of the facility. We eliminated the tax-exempt lease purchase language because it's no longer relevant. The term of agreement is 3 years. We have a better description of what is the equipment and facility responsibilities, and that's one of the areas that could sometimes cause some conflict, and so we wanted to clarify those areas. We added a requirement for the club to maintain a list of all personal property over 2,000. We added language that the use of irrigation water will comply with well permits. We added language that the City Council and appropriate staff will tour the facility annually. We removed the language for payment of water pumping costs because council had made a decision not to charge for those. We added language pertaining to the annual lease payments. When the construction of the clubhouse occurred, the city was paying a portion and the golf course was paying a portion, but that language wasn't in the contract, and so it would probably be appropriate to do that. We added language that the club cannot depart from the budgeted expenses if it would necessitate an unbudgeted increase in issuing liability and debt. We clarified that the responsibility for major repairs is for permanent infrastructure. We added language that the city will fill potholes, we will do striping, and continue to do snow removal on the paved parking lot. And we added language that the debt payments are considered operational expenses. At this point, I'll turn it over to council.
Okay, thank you so very much, Heather. Okay, anyone have any comments? Councilor Hensley.
I'm pretty excited about this. I feel like a lot of real positive energy went into this negotiation. I feel like both sides that went into this, the idea of this is a huge deal for our community, from a quality of life, economic impact, just so many things. And there's no question that the board members have a real passion for the golf course. We as city council representing the city obviously have a passion for the golf course. And I feel like, and obviously most of the, well, a lot of the council members were here, I guess, a few weeks ago, a month ago, to discuss a lot of the specifics in this. And I felt like we left there really with a clear idea of what each side's responsibility was, but at the same time realizing that we also are in a partnership. And so that idea that it just really reinforced that. And for me, I personally am very excited about what this is going to do for moving forward.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Councilor Vigil and Councilor Broyles, you're up next.
Thank you. Just a couple comments. Heather, you mentioned that the term agreement is now 3 years. Can you inform us before that how long the term was?
It was a 10-year term.
So that's really good for us. We can always come back to the table, and if we see changes or if they see changes fit, that we can always talk about that. So that's a really good thing. I'm really glad to see that in there. Ms. Thomas mentioned this. This is a quality of life issue, and I've never golfed in my life. I know nothing about the game of golf, but I know that the big-time golfers in our community say that our golf course is one of the premier in this part of the region, part of the country. And the golf course does make money. The one thing that's holding them back over there, we can all acknowledge it, is the restaurant. And they're working through that and trying to fix that, so I appreciate that. And in that work session we had a couple weeks ago, I did mention, and I'm going to keep mentioning this, is I would like to see the golf board do their financials through the city. That would save them $35,000 to $40,000 a year. With that money, then the golf board could use that to buy new equipment, fertilizer, other things like that. So I'm going to keep pushing that, and I'm glad to report that I know that Mr. John Atencio has talked to Heather about starting those conversations with our finance department. So I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil. Councilor Broyles.
The golf board's in agreement with this lease agreement?
Yes. They've approved it at their meeting last week, and we have a signed contract.
Okay. I too really do like the direction that the golf board is going. I was extremely pleased the last time when we had the work session to how open and transparent they were with us in regards to even open to some of the ideas and suggestions like Councilor Vigil suggested. And the golf course, when you go out there and you look at it, the crew out there, they do such a phenomenal job with the upkeep and maintaining it, and really pleased to see that. I would encourage us to continue to work with the golf board, because I believe from the community standpoint, from talking with a lot of the businesses in the community, they say that having a quality type of golf course like we have is very essential in their recruitment. So I'm very pleased with what's going on right now. Councilor Hensley?
I was just going to say, if there's no further discussion, I move to approve the attached management agreement, agreement for the management and operation of the golf course.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All right. Councilor, start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. The next item is committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight from anyone? Councilor Hensley?
Sorry.
No worries.
So I'll make it quick. So we did have the golf board meeting, I think it was a week ago, and I think the big thing from that is the 2018 membership is open, and if you do it prior, I don't have the date in front of me, I think it's January 1st?
January 31st.
Okay, January 31st, you get a 5% discount. So obviously, really encouraging people to get their memberships early. And then I did go to the CML Research Committee meeting last week up in Denver. Boy, I'll tell you, it really reinforces and strengthens my appreciation for what CML does for us and how together they are and how solid it is and how much work they do. So we reviewed, obviously, a lot of things that we had done last year, and I say we just because I'm part of CML, but obviously they do a lot of the stuff. And so it was real exciting. So talking about some of the research going forward, and so those initial plans of some of the research they'll do for 2018. And some of the areas they're looking at that they will do is group homes, residential group homes, opioids, the homelessness situation, affordable housing. One that I thought was really, we're definitely close to is broadening regionalism with the idea of like how we partner with Monte Vista, things like that, how we as different municipalities can share with others. So those were just a few of the many things that they're going to really work on and research. So we'll have more data and information for the next year.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Are there any other committee reports? Okay, thank you. We'll move forward to the next item on the agenda, and that's staff announcements. Heather?
So we want Public Works to come up, and that's going to be Pat this time. We have a few updates on some Public Works projects to just review of council.
Good evening, Council. I think actually we have some good news for you tonight. You might remember a few years ago we pitched an idea that where we were trying to more creative and effectively implement our 8% public land dedication ordinance. We had come up with an idea to forego some of the public land dedication requirement for the property, the remaining developable property west of the River Trace subdivision, which is the green area, which is just south of the green area up at the top. We were going to forego some of that public land requirement in trade for a trail easement along the river from the northeast corner of the lake in Riverwood all the way up to the end of the county road that goes north from the movie theater. That plan never came to fruition, but from it was born an idea to look at somehow trying to purchase the property known as Carroll's Woods that would, or at least a portion of it, that would provide some contiguous boundary with the ranch property that would give us the potential to add 3 more miles of riparian river bottom trail to our trail system and act as the northern foundation of the ranch to refuge vision. We contacted an organization called Western Rivers Conservancy. They have the ability to bring a varied coalition of funders and supporters to projects like this. They make their living purchasing property, putting conservation easements on it, and donating it back to the public. We've been working on this for, well, I think the idea of trading the public land dedication for the trail easement happened probably 4 or 5 years ago. So it's been kind of a long, drawn-out process. But I am very happy to announce that it seems as though we are very close to this happening in the next 4 to 8 weeks. So what we're looking at is about 200 acres of the Carroll's Woods property. It will add over 2 miles of actual riverside trail and another mile. If we just do the one loop, we could certainly develop trails interior to the property, but it will add a mile of trail through cottonwoods and almost 2 miles of trail right along the river. So that's a big win, and it seems very possible right now.
And then to make sure to manage expectations, it is Western Rivers that is negotiating with the property owner. Once Western Rivers owns it, their intention is that they do want the city to own it, but there needs to be fundraising for them to recoup what some of their costs are, some grants, some of those types of things too. So it's not going to be an automatic transfer to the city, and they may want us to provide some funds towards that as well. And so there's going to be continued discussions, but it is at least headed in a very positive direction.
It's a very positive direction, and until they are confident enough that those funds will become available, they are talking about purchasing the property before they actually have all of those funds in hand, and then they would then ask the city to operate or manage the property under a management agreement. So, there's no questions. As you guys are aware, we budgeted $75,000 this year for the completion of a certification needs assessment on the levee that would hopefully provide to us a comprehensive list of those improvements and upgrades and maintenance items and program developments that would be required for recertification of the levee. While we were preparing the RFP, I was in contact with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And I asked them for boilerplate language because it's a fairly technical RFP that was out of the scope of our ability to completely craft. So as a part of those discussions, she offered to have their contract engineer, they do a bid every few years to hire an engineer to handle all of the Colorado Water Conservation Bureau engineering business. She offered to have their contract engineer take a look at our old needs assessment, evaluate what would need to be done for the new one, and to give us a price. Much to our surprise, that price came in at $500,000. We had budgeted 75 based on the assumption that the certification needs assessment that was done in 2012 would have some value as reference because a lot of the work had already been done, but it was not. So there were literally months of wringing the hands and gnashing of the teeth and difficult conversations, and it ended up being offered by CWCB to, if we would dedicate our $75,000 that we have budgeted, they would pay for the balance of the assessment out of their fund balance, out of their end-of-year fund balance. So that is a big bonus to us. It could potentially $425,000. We can finally get started on that recertification. It'll give us a basis of knowledge as far as what we need to do, how we need to go about it, and we can start working on the design process and working on costing those. Then we can start evaluating different funding mechanisms for that work.
Wow. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Next item.
That's $425,000 awesome.
Yeah, that's right. That is.
Question, how long is that certification good for then?
Once we get it certified, it's up to us to maintain it. We maintained, and again, sometimes with regulations, I think they used to, put the cheese in front of the mouse, and then they started putting the cheese in a maze and let the mouse find the cheese, and now sometimes I question whether they even put the cheese in the maze. We had a certification, they changed their regulations. All of a sudden we lost our certification. So it's not the fault of staff or the community or anything like that. We lost our certification as a result of changes in regulations for levee maintenance. They decided that some of the design elements in our levee were no longer adequate, so they just pulled the certification.
Thank you.
Next item of business is the railroad crossing at Ladue. We had negotiated with the railroad roles and scopes of work for each of our different organizations to rebuild that crossing. As you know, it's been a point of contention for quite some time. It's not something that the city can just go in and do. The railroad has to be involved. It's their property. We can't do it. So we had negotiated that. We had a start date, as we told you, as was advertised on Facebook, and we actually went out and saw cut the asphalt in preparation of the work. We did what we were supposed to do. We got to a few days before the work was supposed to begin. I hadn't heard back from them on some things that they were supposed to get back to me on. I called them up. They told me that I wasn't sure if they failed to order the material or didn't get it, but they said that at this point it was impossible for them to do the work until next spring. So we do have an avenue to pursue. I can chase that all the way up to their executive VP at Chicago, but right now we have no hot mix. So even if I could negotiate the work right now somehow, we don't have the material to make an effective patch. We'd have to put in which would just greatly increase our cost. We'd have to put in a temporary patch. It's gonna require constant observation and maintenance all winter, and then we'd have to pull that out next year and redo it with an appropriate material. So right now, it's looking like first of next spring. I've got a call to them in my tickler file, in Mark's tickler file, for the end of March, when we can get in there and we can be. I want to get the first asphalt out of the plant in the spring.
And from the reason we wanted to provide this in a meeting, in a public meeting, is these assurances that the project was going to happen was made publicly. So just from a credibility perspective and accountability perspective, we want to make sure that we can get this information back out to the public, and that it's not just seen as the ball was dropped or we're ignoring it or something like that too. And so I hadn't realized the perception that if we don't close that communication loop, we just have to be more diligent in that. And so that's why we wanted to present it in this manner.
Councilor Vigil?
So the state isn't involved anymore? It's just the city and the railroad?
No, that grant that you had discovered, it doesn't apply to crossings like this. Okay. We've investigated that to the end. But as far as this work not being done after we told you and the community that it was going to be done, it was as much a surprise to us as it was to you. So
I think it's very important. I'm really glad that you all brought that up today, because people in the community have been talking about that crossing.
I would love to fix it.
Mm-hmm. And it's good whenever we can be transparent like that, so people will know that their concerns are not falling on deaf ears. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very crucial for us to continue to keep dialogue going and also keeping an update on that crossing, because people are really concerned with that.
Yeah. As well they should. It's rough.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay. Last item tonight, you'll remember we went over a bunch of preliminary numbers that I had prepared for the cost of implementing a curbside recycling program. You had directed us, you reacted favorably enough to that, you directed us to perform some public outreach and gauge what degree of citizen interest we have. This winter, we plan on beginning that. We'll work with our new planner to help create an outreach program with some other local and community partners. We'll gauge that interest. Then we can begin, if that interest proves to exist, then we can begin to refine those numbers and bring you another presentation early next spring.
Any questions for Pat before I bring Andy up here?
Any questions? Well, Pat, thank you so very much for all that information, and that $425,000 is truly a gift to the city in a big way. Thank you.
All right, good evening, Council. Excuse me. I don't want to show up Public Works here, but I do have some good news to share with you, because they have been a big help in whatever we do. So I'll give you an update on some Parks and Rec stuff, and I'll give you a little background because we have some new counselors. The Alamosa Rio Coalition, this is Recreation Inspires Opportunities, was awarded $886,000 from Great Outdoors, Colorado. And this is basically to get kids outside. So it's really exciting. GOCO, Great Outdoors Colorado, it operates a competitive grant program for public entities in Colorado to do Parks and Rec projects. So that's kind of the preeminent funder of a lot of things that we do. So you'll hear the term GOCO a lot from me, probably if you see me standing up here. So a little background on the Inspire initiative was a GOCO initiative to get kids outside and develop the next generation of public land stewards. Originally, Alamosa was a hub for this effort with 6 other valley communities. GOCO funded a select few of those communities in 2016, didn't fund us, and invited us back to apply individually in 2017. Basically, they said, you should refine yours, focus on Alamosa. We found trying to gather 7 hubs together and apply for the same initiative in the Valley was very difficult. Yet we did develop good relationships out of that. So after a 3-year effort, a reformed coalition, including the city, San Luis Valley Great Outdoors, the Boys and Girls Club, the Rio Grande Farm Park, Adams State University, and others, now will implement a series of outdoor recreation and education programs and have the capacity to do them. For the city specifically, this means a full-time outdoor recreation specialist under Parks and Recreation funded for 3 years, which Council has already agreed to fund after the 3 years are up, so you guys know. A series of multi-use trails at the Oxbow Recreation Area and Blanca Vista Park, and an expanded Weekends on the Rio program, a summertime series of outdoor recreation and leisure pursuits, from kids cycling and river paddle boarding to our staple Alma concerts. More importantly, through our coalition, it means kids and families will now have many more meaningful, accessible, and affordable outdoor experiences with age-appropriate opportunities from kindergarten to college. We call it scaffolding. They will now have affordable, accessible outdoor experiences all the way from kindergarten to college age, and it leads into pathways where kids get internships and maybe eventually our outdoor recreation specialist jobs. So this is really exciting for our community, combined with the river revitalization effort. It just kind of fits right in with that. So you'll be hearing more about that as we fire that up in 2018. A couple other things, the Daniels Fund. Yesterday we were notified the Daniels Fund will be contributing $50,000 to the multi-purpose facility. Yahoo!
Yes.
This pushes our outside funding for the project to $670,000. Really thankful and grateful. They've been a partner with us for skating for years. For you new counselors, they funded the lights at Carroll Park. They helped fund our Zamboni. So when they saw this place starting to come to fruition, you know, they were excited, and they came for a visit and saw it, and that was the hook. We got them there. Facility update, the floors poured. I think Public Works is helping to manage the hundreds of little issues that come up with such a giant project, but me and Public Works are kind of combined on the effort to manage that. We're still on schedule for a late January opening, so you know that's very exciting for winter recreation in the community. Finally, we submitted a CTC XL. It's called a vegetation management grant, but it's a tree grant, and every other year when it's under Excel, we have to find a place on city property to do this under power lines. So we chose the southern gateway in front of the cemetery because of the fit on both sides of that issue. It's an important gateway with people coming from the airport, and it's also beautifying the cemetery. We'll match it with around $3,000, and we'll have irrigation out there, so it's a good way to leverage city funds and beautify our city, and I know the tree board was super excited to get that turned in. We've had that funding the last 8 or 9 years, so we're pretty confident we'll get that one. I think that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Any questions, anyone? Does anyone have any questions? Andy, thank you so very much. I don't think everybody really understands how much money that really is and how far that money will go. And so I'm just going to say, Yahoo! Because that's what we should respond. That's the way we should be, totally excited to get that much funding to create opportunities outdoors for our youth so they can have things to do and keep them busy instead of focusing on things that are inside of the home. So this is huge, everybody. So I'm going to bring a little energy right now to just let you know, thank you so very much. And Pat, I'm giving you a little energy also because that was great with that $425,000 as well. So keep up that great work, because when kids have opportunities to have access to these outdoor activities, that's going to really help out with the drug issues that we have as well, because now these kids can get high on things that's going to inspire them and encourage them to reach for greatness versus falling into a routine of using any type of illegal substances. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Heather?
In regards to some more updates, just a reminder, we discussed it. You do have training next week, December 13th, for the Liquor License Authority training. We're also going to add a discussion and post that in regards to the questions for the at-large vacancy interviews. We are going to be saying goodbye this month to some of our staff. Pat, his last day is this Friday, and we are having the going away party for him, and that is from 2 to 4 here at City Hall. And so if you want to come toast him, or if you want to be nice, whatever you want, you can come and get your jabs in before he leaves. Hines is actually leaving as well, and his going away party is next Tuesday the 12th from 1 to 2 at the Recreation Center. And so it's 2 department heads who are moving on to probably bigger and better things, and we're seeing some changes here in the city because of that. So it'd be a great time just to say thank you for everything they've done. I do have 2 questions for you. We have 2 items that have been on the list of needing council action, and we're not sure if council feels that you'd want us to have a work session first, or if you'd want us to bring it directly at your next meeting. The first one is we have a temporary ban in place on the marijuana clubs. That is going to expire. We had that to where we could have the election, find out what the voters felt on the others. And so we could either have a work session for you to discuss if you want to do a permanent ban or if you want to do something else, or if it is something that you think based on the vote that you're ready for us to bring to the next meeting, we can bring something that does a permanent ban of pot shops at the next meeting. So we didn't know if you wanted a work session or not on that topic.
Put your mic on.
I didn't hear the first part of that question.
Consumption clubs.
Consumption clubs.
So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it seems like the voters were pretty obvious about not really wanting any type of marijuana sales in the city of Alamosa. What would it look like creating an ordinance that would say that we're banning the clubs?
It's pretty straightforward. It's just they would not be allowed. And so from a staff perspective, it's not so much if you agree with it or not. It's a pretty straightforward situation. Do you want to continue the ban, or do you want to allow them? And so we can bring that easily to the next meeting, but we weren't sure with our new council members if it's somehow tied into a bigger issue or there's more discussion on it that's needed to craft it. But correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, I think it's a pretty straightforward issue on do we ban them or allow them?
Well, no. It's a straightforward issue if we ban them. If we allow them, then we've got a zone for them. We've got to come up with whatever regulations are appropriate. So that would be, I guess that would be the question. But the initial question, do you want to allow them or do you want to ban them? That one's very straightforward.
Councilor Broyles?
I don't think I need a work session.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilman Carson?
I agree with Councilor Broyles. I think we can bring it to the next meeting and deal with it then.
Councilor Hensley or Vigil, any consensus? No? What, think we should? Okay, so it looks like we have a consensus.
Okay. So no work session for that one. We'll bring that one of the next meetings, if not the next one. The next one is looking at our municipal court. We've had a few work sessions with council to discuss the decriminalization of some of the municipal ordinances. Do you feel like we need another work session to discuss that, or do you feel as if we bring an ordinance forward that decriminalizes certain portions of the municipal code that you would be able to handle that in a regular meeting?
I think with the new council members, and I don't think they really had a chance to attend that might be something for a work session, especially if we can get the new judge to participate as well. And I think that would give us some better understanding. It's just my thoughts, but go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, I would not want the new judge participating. He will be applying this code, so I don't want him involved in the development of the code.
Okay. Councilor Broyles.
Well, are they complex or are they simple matters, or?
It's pretty straightforward. We would be decriminalizing almost, if not every single offense in the Alamosa Municipal Code, at least on first, second, or pick your number. Until you get to a third or fourth offense, there would not be a possibility of jail. That's what we have discussed. So really the only complicated part is what's the rationale behind that? Why do we want to do that? Does that make sense? How it's done is pretty straightforward.
I would still recommend a work session for that because due to the situation we've just gone through. I would recommend so we can have a lot more clarity in that area.
That's fine. Council during some of the previous discussions had a lot thrown at it, and so we weren't quite sure if you were comfortable with that you had fully discussed it and processed it, and if it was ready or if it was something there's still some remaining questions. So we'll schedule a work session.
Okay.
And with that, I'll turn it over to an exciting update from the city attorney.
Well, even I'm not excited about this one the way I would be with $475,000 or Arrow's impossibility theorem. But I just wanted to update you, let you know that on behalf of the City of Alamosa, I signed on to an amicus friend of the court brief filed by CML in defense of home rule powers. This arises out of a action by the Colorado Independent Ethics Commission concerning Weld County. Weld County is a home rule county. The Ethics Commission has promulgated a rule back in 2016 that they took the position that they didn't care what home rule jurisdictions did with respect to their own ethics rules. The Ethics Commission was going to wade in and apply theirs in home rule situations where we believe and CML believes that the Constitution specifically carves out an exception that allows home rule jurisdictions to govern their own ethics. So this is an amicus brief filed in front of the Ethics Commission for a consideration of the application of that principle to an ethics situation that arose in Weld County. We've joined probably 12 or 13 other home rule jurisdictions in signing on to that brief, just so you know.
And there is no cost to the city.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the time you're going to put into that. Wow.
That concludes staff comments.
Staff announcement, okay. That brings us up to council comments. Councilor Hensley, who was first? Okay, Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Vigil.
So two things. So Coach Martin, I don't know if it was clear, so he wanted to find out, he was the track coach or cross-country coach. He wanted to see if any of us, including you, Mayor, would be at Friday night's game at halftime to be part of that presentation for the day. So, so the game's at 7:30, so halftime would be, I don't know, 8 to 8:30. So anyway, so just he wanted to make sure that everybody's invited. I always go to the game, so I definitely will be there. But
okay, thank you so very much.
And I think it's something that they call them out to the court.
Oh, they will, yes.
Yeah, so it's an actual presentation, that you're being invited to.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to let them know ahead of time.
He'd like to know, but like I say, I think whoever shows up would be fine, but if you can know ahead of time, that's great. Okay. And I was more just saying, since I know I'm going to be at the game, you at least know you have one person there, so.
Okay. I'll let you know something when I check my
Thank you.
calendar.
And so if each person, if you just want to send me an email or let me know. Okay.
I'll be there as well.
Okay, cool. Pat, I just want to let you know that it's very bittersweet that you're leaving. I know it's great for you and your family, and I'm very, very happy for you, and you deserve it. I'm going to miss you a lot. And I've really, really enjoyed our partnership. I've enjoyed working with you. You're a great person, both as an employee, but also just as a person and the different conversations we've had. And so I definitely wish you the best. I know we'll keep in touch, but I just want you to know how much I appreciate you.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome, sir.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the following high schools. I don't know if y'all noticed, but there was a lot of people in town over the weekend. Yeah. It was the opening weekend of basketball, and there was some tournaments, and Alamosa, Sangre, Sargent, and Centauri hosted tournaments, and people came to Alamosa and stayed here. We had 2 teams from Basalt, Olathe, Las Animas, Creed, Ouray, Montrose, Palmer Ridge, Elizabeth, and Salida. And then all of the Valley teams were playing in here too, so that's a lot of money and butts and beds for the city of Alamosa. And again, as Ms. Thomas said, Pat, thank you for everything you've done for the city of Alamosa. I've enjoyed your friendship and your expertise in showing me the ropes with Public Works, and I've learned a lot from you. And good luck.
Okay. Any other comments from you two? No? Okay. Councilor Brawls.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be in the city council, my first city council meeting, and I appreciate the councilman and the new mayor. So it'll be great to work with you. And I appreciate the staff also. I think the staff's done a great job, and I know Pat over the years, he's done a great job, so good job. And same thing with the recreation department, good job there. So again, thanks to staff and thanks to Heather and Eric and Holly for all your hard work, and it's great being here with the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Brawls. Councilor Carson.
I'd just like to say thank you as well. I look forward to this journey, and let's get it started, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Hensley.
Sorry, one more thing. I would like to congratulate all the Adams State graduates who are going to graduate next Saturday. And since he's in the audience, I'm going to congratulate special congratulations to my nephew, Marco Garmendia, who is also graduating. He's been here for the last 4 years from Oregon. And so we'll miss him when he leaves. He's got some great opportunities, but he's done a lot for our community, actually, already in the last year. So since you're here, I wanted to commend you and congratulate you, but also to all the graduates from Adams State.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. I would like to chime in on the Marco. Marco worked for our bank as well as an intern, and he is what you call the epitome of an intern. He came into our bank and immediately has made a great first and lasting impression on our entire staff with his work ethics, with his attitude, and with his personality and his draw to actually draw people into him. And he's done a great job with the promotion of the bank and doing marketing and things like that. And we're going to miss him greatly. In fact, I already miss him at the bank. So thank you, Marco, and we wish you much success. And Marco is one of those success stories that ASU students that come in and they get an opportunity to work with a local business, and then they get that experience that they need to help them get propelled to a new level and get opportunities other places. We were hoping we can get him to stay here, but unfortunately he had a real good, sweet situation that he's going to leave. But thank you, Marco. You're welcome. Okay. Any more? Any other comments? Well, Pat, thank you so very much. We will truly miss you, and I will forever be grateful for your insight and wisdom that you've shared with me as a new counselor. I remember when I first started, you are the one who took me on a tour to all of the different city facilities, and I wish you all could have really saw the excitement that he had on his face when he would go to each department and introduce me to all the different staff that were there. It's such a joy, and I tell you, one of the experience I won't forget is going inside of one of those water towers. I've always wanted to know what it looked like in one of those, and it was really cool. He showed me the inner workings of that, and also the sanitation area over there and different areas. So thank you, Pat, and I wish you and your family the very best in your future. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, feel free to let us know. Thank you so much. And then the other thing I would like to just thank our new city council people. You all made it through it. You see, this is why they pay you all the big bucks. You're going to be working late a lot of nights like this right here, but it's all good, though. You see, what I like about this meeting is that everybody came together for the common good of our community, and I think when we work together like this, there's no stopping to what we can do. So thank you, new council members, and thank you for Councilor Vigil for your insight today, and Councilor Hensley as well, Councilor Carson, and Councilor Brawls. And just one other thing, I forgot to mention a few people who came in earlier today that supported me and helped me on my campaign: Brittany, Robert, Dunn, and Andrea Spencer, Azenith, and also I just wanted to make sure that I did say thank you to them as well. I didn't notice them until after they were leaving out the door. And also for the people who are thinking about taking on that at-large position, I see many of you in the audience, you all stuck it out as well. So thank you so much for that. Take care, everybody. Have a super fantastic day. The meeting is adjourned. Good night.